Okay, why don't we call Mass Gaming Commission Public Meeting number 15 to order on July 10th. And we will start out with item 2, approval of the minutes for July 2nd. Commissioner McHugh.
I distributed those minutes, Mr. Chairman, late last night. If everybody's had a chance to read them, we can address them now. Otherwise, we'll address them next week. But with that, comments are welcome.
I have a comment, Mr. Chairman. On page 2, towards the middle of the page where it says right after the second motion, I would like for consideration that the minutes reflect that Commissioner McHugh asked whether there was any reason to pre-qualify only the second highest ranked firm, to which I responded just the way that the paragraph reflects.
So he
okay.
In other words, I made a motion to pre-qualify the second highest ranked firm. Commissioner McHugh asked the question as to whether there was any reason not to pre-qualify 3 firms, which was essentially, my response is reflected here. Right. It's all correct. Okay. But it was prompted by that question, which I believe is relevant for the minutes to reflect.
Okay.
Okay.
I just had one change on page 6, third paragraph about the Western Mass Forum, just spelling correction is somewhere within there.
Yeah. I've got that one, thank you.
Any others?
No changes.
You want to move?
All right, so I move that with those corrections, the spelling correction and the correction suggested by Commissioner Zuniga, that the minutes of the July 2 meeting be approved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. Item number 3, administration, the executive search firm update. Commissioner Zuniga.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As per last meeting, we approved jury staff to help us with the executive search of the executive director. And we've invited them to come and introduce themselves. Jim and Elizabeth are here. If you wouldn't mind.
Right over here.
Jim.
Hello, you want to introduce yourselves?
Jim LaRosa with Georgetown.
Sure, Jennifer Romaine, also with Jura staff.
Jennifer.
Jennifer, I'm sorry.
Jennifer.
Yeah,
Yes.
good.
Just want to pull that in a little bit closer.
So by way of introduction, we had a small conversation relative to inviting them here to introduce themselves, to have an opportunity of this commission to ask questions or have an opportunity of our consultants to ask questions specifically as of relative to the next steps for this commission.
Yeah, I think there were, from my memory, there were a couple things. One was we were just interested to meet you and get started talking about the process and have a chance to interact with you in a public format of all of our thoughts. And a sort of a subset of that is, coincidentally, our other consultants, our gaming consultants, are here today. And if you have a chance to make, if you haven't already had a chance to make connections with them, they're very, very knowledgeable about the industry. They know everybody in the industry, and they've volunteered to help get you and us in contact with leads and so forth. So you'll see them. Have you met them already? Or?
No, we have not.
All right, fine.
So
Well,
we'll make sure to do
they'll
so.
be introduced, right. And Fred Cushion from the Spectrum behind you.
Hi, Fred.
But I think they'll be real helpful and can help us move the process along.
Great.
Wonderful.
But the second issue, so maybe the second issue is to talk about the subcommittee idea, right?
Right.
But maybe let's start out just by kind of getting a quick overview from you on what the process is, and I'm sure we all have thoughts to how to contribute to that.
Sure. Well, I'll start. First, I want to thank you for the opportunity. And I think we understand the I guess, the corresponding priorities of finding the most qualified candidate, but also that this position is of high importance to you and that you'd like to move as quickly as possible, keeping in mind that you get the most qualified candidate for the position. In terms of kind of how we proceed, truthfully, a lot of that will come from talking to you folks more. The next step for us really is to have an opportunity to learn more about what you envision this position to be, learn more about what you expect in candidates for this position, and a lot of discussions regarding that, talking about the organizational chart a bit and what the job duties will be and who they will, who the executive director will oversee in their job functions. With that, we would basically, whatever you guys think is the best forum to sit down with either all or some of you or the consultants to learn as much as we can about the position. At that point, we would then put together a job description that we have put together from talking to you, pass it on to you, and have you guys approve it. We don't want to go out to the world and start talking to folks on your behalf without you guys having, without the commission having signed off on what in fact it is you want us to say and how you want us to present this position. So really, at this point, I think we would look for an opportunity to get more information about how you envision, what you envision this position to be. At that point, like I said, we'll draft a position description, get approval from the commission, and then from there, go out and start to talk to people on your behalf. So Jennifer, I don't know if there's anything.
As well as our hopes is to get a better sense, as we discussed earlier with Commissioner Zuniga, about the organizational structure, the governing structure
Right.
of the gaming commission, as well as the process, the interview process.
Let's all interact with that, just, and I'll just throw in this, just my own personal thoughts. First of all, there has been a draft job description done already that you've, I guess, seen, that came from the consultants. There are a number of iterations of organizational charts floating around. Then they aren't all that different. I mean, they all pretty much look the same. There is one substantive issue, because our legislation has the person in charge of the Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement reporting to the chair. We have, I think, kind of presumptively suggested that I will delegate that back to the executive director. But that's the only place where I see a really big substantive question in the job description that somebody, so you should avail yourselves of the expertise that's already been floating around, and don't create this whole cloth. But, and here's just where I'm speaking for myself, I don't see the need to stand on principle. I think that the people in the industry know what an executive director of a regulatory agency in a state does, basically. So, yes, we should absolutely fine-tune the job description. We should absolutely fine-tune the written material that's typically behind a search and all that sort of stuff. But I don't see why we wouldn't start to reach out right away. And, so that you begin the process of ginning up leads and getting the word out immediately. And by the time you get the job description formally approved by us, maybe, if we're lucky, there'll start to be a flow of recommendations and stuff.
Well,
Again, that's just me speaking, if anybody disagrees with that.
Just, I guess, response is, maybe the formal job description is not as necessary, but I think further conversations just about what you envision this position to be. Again, I understand that in general there are other executive director positions within the gaming industry, but typically from our experience, when you have the opportunity to speak to strong candidates for a position, they typically in the first conversation are going to have fairly pointed questions about the position. How big is the staff? What's my budget going to be? What do you envision this in 2 years? How will this look? Tell me about the relocation package. And our experience has been the more information we have in that first phone conversation, the better chance we have to keep good candidates in the mix. Our preference is not to have to have an early conversation, not have the answers, and then have to come get them and then go back to the person. And again, in our experience, sometimes you don't get the person again. We'd like to have as much information as we can from the very first conversation. And we found typically that's how we get good candidates engaged quickly, so.
Well, that's very helpful, and I appreciate
Yeah.
that. And what you're hearing is the tension that we constantly have between, moving quickly on the one hand and due deliberation on the other. And to the extent that those two things can be combined, that you can have
Absolutely.
people on your behalf, like our consultants, out tilling the field a little bit, if that's helpful, great. But bottom line is, we're asking you to do this job and do it right, and don't let us push you out of the best way to do that.
Comment, would it be helpful if you provided us with a document of critical information that you think it would be necessary to move forward, and we can, as quickly as possible, look to get that research done and provide you with answers?
Sure, I
Is
mean,
that the best way to move forward?
That, we can do it. I mean, typically, I'll tell you how we do it in other searches. I mean, if you appoint one person or a couple people to be the point person to this, if that's going to take time, then we'll bypass that. But typically, it could really just be a telephone call, a face-to-face meeting, where us just kind of sitting down and discussing what the position really, we know the types of questions we're going to get. And they may seem really even unimportant at this stage, but for some people, it's important. What's my office going to look like? Where are my kids going to go to school? I mean, a lot of questions that we know we'll get early on. And a big question that I would anticipate that we would get in this type of position, where we're looking at executive directors that may be in a similar position in another state, would be the transferability of benefits. And if they've been in, Jennifer's already done some research on executive directors at other gaming commissions, and it appears that a lot of them have been employed by their particular state for a number of years. They come up through the state system and now are in an executive director position. What we've found in the past, one of the driving questions for them right out of the gate is, will I be able to bring my pension? And will I, and as many of those, we don't like to stumble over those questions. And if we can have as much of that information we have at our fingertips in that at the beginning will help us. And so it could really just be a telephone call with whoever you say, here's somebody, call them 10 o'clock tomorrow morning and ask them all your questions, and then we can follow it up with an email or however. But just getting a little bit more information than we have right now would really help.
Mr. Chair, I think this is critical that we move as quickly as we can on this matter, and again, I'm going to recommend that we trust one commissioner to move forward, working with the consultant and provide that information and be the point of contact, and also be the person who works in conjunction with our gaming consultants, who are very, very knowledgeable and frankly will be, I believe, helpful in identifying strong candidates. I've had the opportunity to work with Commissioner Stebbins in conducting interviews. I thought he was superb, and I'm just going to throw his name out there to recommend him for this assignment. I didn't get kicked under the table either.
Well, I do think we need to move as quickly as is consistent with getting you the information you need to attract substantial candidates for consideration. I think that, though, before we make the final decision about whether we have a single commissioner do this or whether we appoint a subcommittee to do this, we need to do a little bit further in inquiry. And we need to do a little bit further inquiry primarily with respect to the degree to which we can confidently assure unsuccessful candidates who would not enter the pool without an assurance of confidentiality that they will have that confidentiality. If we have a single commissioner apart from, and this is apart from the desirability of having a single person as opposed to a subcommittee of two. If we have a single commissioner, then we have a certain set of principles that applies. And those are basically the principles that flow from the Freedom of Information Act. If we have a subcommittee, then we have a different set of principles that apply from the open meeting law and from the protections that are afforded for executive session deliberations under the open meeting law. And the question, at least in part for me, is which provides the stronger guarantee. So we've talked with our counsel about that. We've gotten an opinion from our counsel. And I would very much like to draw up a sort of profile of the two procedures and then get some advice from state administrators as to what those profiles look like. It wouldn't take very long. And what, if anything, they can tell us about the guarantees and the extent of the guarantees of confidentiality that would flow from both of those. We can do that very quickly, I think, and while we're doing that, we can proceed with the information gathering and delivery of information and do in public session the kind of approval of the job description that flows out of this and the like over the next week or so, and then be set to go with some assurance that we know with a high degree of confidence that what we say we can deliver on. So I would recommend that we delay the decision as to whether we have a single commissioner or a subcommittee involved in this until we make that determination and get that advice.
Is there any reason why we can't do both? I mean, why couldn't we suggest, we do want a point person, whether we have a subcommittee or not, I would think we'd want a point person on the commission to be the contact person. And we'd want a point person to be responsive to whatever the series of questions are.
I'm sorry,
So-
I didn't mean to negate that.
Okay, so we could appoint a commissioner right now
Sure.
to be the point person, and then while the ball is rolling,
Right.
we can consider, whether we add on to that him or her
Right.
a subcommittee.
Right, no, that's perfectly consistent with.
I would just like to caution us that we not take very much time with this decision because Commissioner Zuniga asked me to participate with him in interviewing search firms, and the overarching message was we would need to know that information early because candidates will need to know that right away, and they will make a decision, and and it was the opinion, especially of this firm, that we would get far fewer candidates, frankly, if that information was subject to indecision about whether or not it would become public information. So I just would urge us to make a decision quickly so that the process is not held up.
If I
We're not saying different things, Commissioner. I think I envision this to be a quick process, but I do think that we do need to be able to assure ourselves that what we're saying to the candidates is so. And until and I'm not there yet, so until we have that degree of confidence that what we say is what we can deliver on, I think we can't reach out to people and potentially mislead them.
Couple of points that I'd like to just address on the issue. First of all, I agree with Commissioner Cameron that it is, we think, important to be able to let the candidates know that their name will not be released, especially obviously candidates that are currently working. They would tend to not throw their hat in the ring, so to speak, if they knew the public information would get out. So another point on that, doesn't really prevent us from starting to talking to people, though. We can talk to people and let them know. We can start to talk to them and let them know where, if we don't know at that point, we can say, as soon as we can confirm with you that the information will be held, we'll pass your name on. But that doesn't prevent us from at least starting to see who's interested. So from that perspective, even if it takes you guys a little bit more time than you would like, we will continue to talk to people once we have all the information. The other point of clarification, I guess, that I would like from the commission is my understanding in reading the open meeting law is that once you get it down to however many you determine to be a couple of finalists, at that point, it does have to come out, and that was, and I know I've read the information about the University of Massachusetts situation, and in that situation, they went ahead and made the decision without ever revealing the candidates' names. So as much as we can know about that and because at some point, even in the preliminary discussions, the names won't be released, but at some point, if they become a finalist, their name is going to have to become out, to be made public. So as much as we can learn about that, because we do owe it to the candidates to let them know at what point in the process that will be and what that will entail. So any information we can get on that would be helpful.
Just a quick clarification. You opened by talking about the fact that not having a concrete process in place somewhat inhibits who you can talk to and whether you re-engage that person or not. But you just kind of followed it up with saying there is some stuff we can do and that we can begin to talk to people. So I'm just.
Yeah, what I first said
balancing
was,
those
yeah,
two
it would be very good for us to have as much information as we can about this position and the things like I was talking about, the relocation or expenses or benefits and so forth, so we can have a discussion. And we can have that discussion with someone and say, listen, at this point, the preliminary stages, your name may have to be open to the public. We're hoping it won't be, but what we're doing right now is having a preliminary discussion with you to see, once we're assured that your name will be held out of the public until a certain point, we wanted to have a conversation with you first, tell you everything we know about the position to gauge your interest in this opportunity. And that way, once you give us the green light, yes, we're going to have one commissioner, it's going to not be public information, we may have a few people already that we can go back to. But I still want to have that first conversation without a little bit more of the other information that I was talking before. But if we have that information about the position itself, we can go talk to people, let them know what the situation is, and at least gauge their interest, and then come back to them when we know definitively.
Okay. Let me ask your thoughts just quickly on professional advertising of such a position. I mean, this is, obviously there are industry documents or industry publications. I would imagine, though, that there's a certain level of, people in the industry aware of, okay, Massachusetts passed a law then, looking for an executive director, called for in the legislation, some publicity around your selection as the firm. Tell me where you kind of see advertising or the requirement or need for advertising kind of fitting into your recruitment strategy.
I think that advertising is something that we typically use all the time, I would say, depending on the search. I'd say in a search like this, probably 50 to 75%, we're probably not going to get the person from an ad. It's going to be from us reaching out, because the folks that are responding to the ads, oftentimes they know, they're not really sure, unless we say something in the ad, that it's coming to us directly. They may not know where there's the confidentiality concerns that they have. That being said, I mean, we typically we'll get candidates that are, worth talking to, and we may find the candidate that you select from that ad. So I do think it's a useful tool to do, and it also, it's a marketing device in essence, where somebody may not respond to that ad, but if we reach out to them, they're aware of it through the ad. Typically, the way the ad would work would be the information would come to us, and at that point, we can tell them whether or not their name was going to be open to public record. And so, and again, we could talk to you about if you would want in the ad any information about whether it would be public or non-public at the preliminary stage. But I would say that we would definitely want to run the ads and see what we got from the ads.
Our consultant team, I would think, would have pretty good ideas
Yeah.
about, whether and where to advertise. in this unique niche.
Yeah, One of the questions that Jim was asking me prior to this, as we were sort of thinking through, on formalizing our contractual relationship, were things that I think should be brought up here and talked about, or maybe we can table them for that point person. But a couple of those were relative to the relationship between that executive director and the commission, that in this case is a full-time commission that's in startup mode. So would we be looking for an administrator, somebody who's going to build up an organization? I was confirming that we're all assuming that all policy decisions, or the important policy decisions, are made at the commission or affirmatively delegated to that executive director. But issues around those questions, I think, are relevant. If you had additional thoughts on that, or anybody else wanted to
Well,
weigh in.
and I would just add, I think that that's kind of what I was, some of the nuances of the position are the questions that we get from candidates. And there may be, obviously in this situation, you have 5 full-time commissioners that are very involved in driving the agenda. There will be certain candidates that we speak to that will say, I really like where I am, but if it was an opportunity where I could go and really be the driving force and set the agenda and so forth, then I'd really be interested. Or the opposite. I mean, those are the types of questions that it's good for us to either have the answer, to be able to reach out to somebody really quickly and say, hey, we've got someone we're speaking to, they've expressed some preliminary interest, but it's really a waste of everybody's time, the candidate and yours, to talk to candidates that in the end, really, it's not what they were looking for. So the more of that kind of information, another question that I was speaking to Commissioner Zuniga about was, we've seen in executive director positions, some look at it as we really are looking for someone that is a driver or a leader versus a manager or an administrator. And there really are 2 different types of personalities, and there are 2 different types of experience levels. If what you're looking for is someone that their main functions is going to be a manager and administrator, someone who's been a driver of initiatives and agendas, and really pass that off to someone else would not be the best fit. And so we would want to know as much about those types of nuances of the position as we can to help you find the best candidate that will, in the long term, stay in the position and be best suited for the position.
Well,
In other searches that I've, not many, but the few that I've participated in, this process resulted from discussions between the search team and a number of a number of people in the organization, one case at all levels. But would it be valuable, given the constraints of the need to move swiftly, the constraints of the open meeting law, to spend some time with each of us and see if there's consistency, and then bring to another one of these meetings places where we need decision points, and to harmonize philosophical approaches to the job, or other kinds of things like that.
Well, to your point, Commissioner McEwen, and I started with saying I know that there are really corresponding or dueling priorities here, which is getting the best candidate and but also expedience. To your point, Commissioner, typically that is how we do it. We get as much information as we can up front, and oftentimes it will require basically almost a kind of a sit-down interview with a few people. And something I brought up with Commissioner Zuniga last week was, I asked him, is there a consensus on certain issues? Because that is where we've seen where time has not been put into the process early. What we've seen break down, is when you get deep into the interview process, is the first time that all the parties that have to make the final decision really discuss what it is we're looking for in this candidate, and you get candidates all the way to the finish line, and you can't get agreement amongst the parties that have to make the decision because they really never talked about it until that day. And I've seen that happen many times. Our preferred way of doing it is to talk to folks, and we've had situations where we walked away from searches because I felt there wasn't much chance of success because we had a group of people that were so diametrically opposed in what they thought about that candidate, in the successful candidate. They said, you guys got to get back to me when you are all on the same page, because what's going to happen is you're going to get into that final decision, and you're going to say, well, I need a manager, and I need a leader, or it could be some other issue, and you can't come to a consensus. So it's been while it may slow the process down, or appear to slow the process down at the beginning, doing that heavy lifting up front oftentimes makes it smoother on the back end. Because what's really discouraging is to get all the way to the finish line and not be able to come to a consensus, or have 2 of the 5 of you or 3 of the 5 of you not really on board or feel confident about the decision. So again, you hired us, so we will take our lead from you. And if you say the most important thing is start talking to people and get people in front of us as soon as possible, then that's what we'll do. But like I said, the more information we can have on a lot of these, and it's probably not, it would take separate discussions outside of here to kind of nail some issues down. I think in the long run, that it would probably be more beneficial.
So to that end, both Commissioner McHugh's point and Commissioner Cameron's prior point relative to the information or questions that our recruiters may face, could we, as a next step, have those conversations take place with each one of the commissioners by having our recruiters reaching out to each one of us?
Well, it seems like there's several different things going on. There's one kind of question, which is, can you carry your pension forward? And there's a whole bunch of stuff like that if we have one point of contact, that list of questions can be put together, and that point of contact can lead the process for getting that stuff resolved. Then there's the much more subtle stuff, like you're talking about, to what extent is this a leader versus a manager type question, and whatever else you might think there are, and what other issues that you might think there are. And I think you need to tee those up for us as quickly as you can, and we need to talk about, if you wanted, it's sort of be up to you. You could go around and talk to us in onesies and twosies and get your sense, and then come back to us if you think there's a disconnect, and then we have a group conversation. Or we can set aside a bunch of time next week and do it then. So it's really sort of up to you.
Well, actually,
but those are 2 very different kinds.
We're working for you, so we're available when you tell. It would help us to talk to you folks. So we can, outside of this meeting, I can set up time, whether it be this week or next week, and we will do it as soon as possible. It's not a significant amount, but there's definitely things that we would love to kind of talk. And I think the conversation will help you guys start to think about the position a little bit too, and have maybe some internal discussions. And again, we understand you want us to move quickly, and we will start the conversation. We can do more than we can juggle a few things at once, but if you can give us the time either later this week or next week to have conversations, whether it be face to face or over the phone, it would help a lot.
Well, we can definitely do that.
Okay.
And personally, if there's anything like this issue of leader-manager question, I'd rather have us all talk about it together. It's why go through 2 steps of having to talk to a bunch of people seriatim and then figure out whether you got an issue and then deal with it. So I think we'll give you a contact person for all the sort of factual issues, and the other issues like this one, I would suggest that we just talk about them as a group a little bit now if we want to, or you tee them up the questions and we'll do them next week or as soon as we can.
Well, I think that's a great, the moving fast is a great idea, but I also think there is some value to having these folks who have, this is their livelihood, spend a little bit of time with each of us and come to some assessment as to where the differences, if any, are, and then come back next week and have a discussion that focuses on places where there may be fault lines or differences. I think from just thinking about the process, that might be a much more productive discussion than having a discussion in which they don't know and haven't had an opportunity to see whether there are any fault lines or any differences. It doesn't slow things down. We do it
Yeah,
next week.
I was
and-
saying that's up to them, and that's fine with me.
Yeah.
If you think that's the most constructive way to go about it, let's do it that way.
Yeah, that's,
So presumptively, you'll talk to people on an individual basis, or at least a selection.
Yep.
And try to be ready by this time next week
Yeah.
to figure out whether there are issues and to discuss as a group whatever you all think needs to still be discussed.
okay.
And as much as you want to talk to us independently, we're available. We did come up, this issue about leader manager did come up at an earlier meeting, and you can see the notes in the minutes about it. But I just, I said then, and I will say again, that my own feeling is that we need a really super manager. None of us is gonna do that. And the way I see it, there is gonna be, this person is gonna be driving the operations of the commission all by him or herself. That's what we need somebody to do, big time. And it's virtually the entire organization chart. I see the commissioners driving policy. And obviously, over time, that will evolve, but if that's a meaningful distinction to people, I certainly would see that distinction. We're not gonna be delegating policy to this person, but we would love to delegate every aspect of operations to this person, subject to our overview. I think of this person, so I think this person really needs tremendous management experience, needs to be a formal manager, needs to understand the gaming world very well, needs to understand performance management, performance metrics, performance reviews, personnel policies, et cetera. That's what I think the long seat. So inevitably, that person will also have leadership skills. But if you need to have an emphasis, that's certainly the way that I would go.
Now, in terms of the people that this executive director would be managing starting from day one, what would it look like versus 6 months and a year from now? In terms of a organizational chart, I mean, from what I understand now at least, is you have 4 staff members internally, but I guess those are some of the questions in terms of management being so important. Some more information about who they would be managing right out of the gate, and let's look 6 months and a year down the line. And are there, in terms of their experience now or in the past, are there certain criteria that, we want them to have managed a team of 10 or 20 or 100? And, things like that, so we can kind of make sure that we're getting candidates that have the experience, the past experience, that will be most relevant to what they're going to be doing here.
I'll share with you and point to a couple of documents that our consultants have already produced for us. There's a critical hires memorandum and a work plan, in addition to the conversations that we're suggesting should take place between you and our consultants, could really address a couple of those questions.
Okay.
I think another piece of this is looking at the legislation and how the legislation begins to space things out in terms of licensing requirements, kind of having a document which shows the ins and outs of the bill, almost an executive summary would probably be helpful to a candidate, because then they know timelines and they know operational expectations going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the critical pieces is, for the executive director, is to do a bulk of the hiring, identifying critical staff, understanding what it's going to take for each unit to be staffed properly, understanding all of the functions of which this commission is responsible. And, to get back to your point about a clear distinction with leadership and management, I don't see it as that clear a distinction. I actually think you absolutely need leadership skills. We're talking about 100 or more people in a startup operation, which means getting people to buy into a philosophy. Policy is a different matter, but leadership skills when it comes to supervising personnel and getting them to buy in, I think is critical. So I think, very good leaders have strong management skills. I agree with the chair that the management skills have to be strong, but I actually see it as both, and the best have both.
I'd second that. I, too, agree with the chair's description of the management criteria, but I also think that the person we're looking for has to be somebody so well-versed in the industry that she can continue to make recommendations that'll keep us on the cutting edge, and in addition to that, can, through leadership skills, develop a culture of high performance and integrity that we all collectively want this commission to have. That has to be part of the DNA of the organization from my viewpoint, and so having somebody who has the ability to create that kind of an atmosphere and insist on reinforcing it throughout his or her tenure is extremely important to me as well.
Well said.
The last thing that I would say is, and goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, is that we will put a very, very high premium on diversity in our candidate pool. It's inconceivable to me that we don't have women and minorities in the world that would be first-rate candidates for us. So we would expect that to be, that standard be met. Anything else? I would be perfectly happy to go along with Commissioner Cameron's nomination of Commissioner Stebbins as the point person. And so from here on out, he'll parcel out questions and probably get help from other staff and so forth, but that will become your key point of contact. Next week, or from now until next Tuesday, you'll be invited to talk to whoever you want to about whatever you want to talk about. And then we will hope that you can come back next week with some sense about whether you've got a common view of what the job looks like and whether there are any issues that you need to talk about as a group.
Great. And
Does that sound?
maybe, Commissioner, if you're available tomorrow morning, I'll call you bright and early tomorrow morning, and
Absolutely.
And we'll start.
If you
getting-
want to stick around, we can
Yeah.
catch up after this.
Yeah, perfect.
Great. Thank you very much.
Terrific.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, additional hires. We announced Heather Fong as our receptionist. She started today. I have the pleasure of announcing another staff person. We have felt for a long time, as everybody's heard, that we need strong administrative support, staff support. We've been looking for 2 or 3 months for some kind of senior person who could take a big chunk of the administrative role away from us, both on running the operations of the commission and also setting up the systems for managing the consultant and our ongoing project work. We eventually decided that we should have somebody that has state government experience because there's just too much of what we do that interfaces with state government, IT, HR, finance, et cetera. We couldn't, somebody fresh to the world without state government experience wouldn't make sense. We interviewed, I think, we had at least 2 commissioners interview at least 4 candidates, and we came up with a very strong consensus to offer a position to Eileen Glovsky, who is presently a deputy treasurer, and to be our director of administrative services. And she has accepted, and she has passed all of the background check criteria, and she will be starting July 23rd, which will be a pleasure for everybody. And we have a new intern whom Janice can introduce.
This is Matt Sportline, joined us today too, along with Heather.
And it's going to be doing
Everything.
everything. Okay, welcome. And we have a couple more in the pipeline, which hopefully we will be able to talk about soon. Commissioner Zuniga, are there any internal policies that we need to talk about? Or first, anything else on additional hires?
Well, Commissioner Cameron and I have been discussing back and forth the desirability of getting some legal assistance. Commissioner Cameron now is responsible for various hearings. We'll hear more about that later. And findings and conclusions have to be done there. There's a number of other issues on the racing front that will need to be addressed. There are increasing numbers of legal issues that we're going to confront as we move forward with the regulation adoption process. We have able outside counsel, but it would be helpful to have some internal legal assistance as well. And so I have no motion to make at this point, but I think that that is a position that we ought to put on a list of near-term hires. The general counsel piece probably is something we ought to get teed up for when we bring the executive director on board, so that he or she can have a say in that. That's not an absolute requirement, but somebody at a lower level who's good, competent, and aggressive would be of assistance.
I agree with that. We talked about that. So as far as I'm concerned, it's totally up to you all to make a recommendation whenever you think the time is right.
I just want to concur with Commissioner McHugh. I think independently, we came to this, this conclusion that this would be a very good thing for the commission to consider. I have had a number of issues where it's required some legal assistance, and moving forward, I just see more and more issues that require legal assistance for us to make good decisions, for me to make good recommendations to the commission. So I just would concur that that's something we should consider in the near future.
Okay. Well, because the process, the timeline is what it is. I mean, if you can get interns or, work study, that's a little bit different. But for hires, the process is such that if you want to do it soon, we need to get, just the sooner the better for a recommendation. I think that's what you want to do. It's interesting, did we lose jury staff? Yeah, I guess we lost jury staff. We've talked about the direct reports to the ED, and we've talked a little bit about maybe the director of communications might have sort of a mixed relationship and report a little bit to the commission, but the general counsel will be another such question that we need to think through.
Right.
What is that reporting
Right.
line? Because so much of the commission's work will be legal work, the commissioner's work.
Right.
Okay. So then 3C, discussion of MGC internal policies, anything on the table here?
Well, the latest update is that I've finished drafted all chapters, the last of the 6 chapters of the policies. They came from different sources, so I didn't start from a blank slate. But Commissioner McHugh is reviewing the last 2 for the quality assurance and quality control process that we set for ourselves. So when he's done with that, we'd be able to present a 6-chapter employee handbook in draft mode to this commission.
Yes, and I, Commissioner Zuniga gave me those last week. I have not been able to get to them, but I plan to do that tomorrow or the next day. So I would hope that we, depending on Commissioner Zuniga's availability to incorporate the suggestions, could have them as early as next week.
Okay.
And then we have a policy manual in place.
So, but we're going to need, are you going to suggest that we read it and review it before we adopt it, or?
Yes.
Probably makes sense. So
Yes, yes.
whatever, it's going to take if it's a 6-chapter thing, it's probably going to take a little time for people to.
It would. In the same venue of what I asked of our own consultants, I will highlight those
Things that are most
sections
important.
that I think are the most important.
Okay.
Whereas others may be required by law, and there's little we can do.
Okay. Do you want to suggest a timeline now? Are you thinking that we might, say, have this by Friday so we could have it next Tuesday, or is that too aggressive, or do you want to wait and see?
Well, I could certainly be finished, and with my suggestions tomorrow, the next day, it could be distributed, I think, probably Friday.
Yep.
Whether it's long.
Yeah.
But we could put it on the table for discussion next week, and if we're not ready to vote on it, we don't vote on it.
Okay, if we can do that, let's try to get it distributed by Friday. And then we could have the weekend and then talk about Tuesday, and if we slip that, we slip that. But that's worth trying, okay?
Could we at least try to tackle half the sections?
We sure can,
The
however.
good chapters?
Yeah.
However you want to, if that works, if you feel there are some that are ready to go, we could do that, but.
Yeah, well, let me highlight, on the highlights that I'm gonna do, let me mention some that I think are pretty straightforward. I will mention, for example, our benefits. We're receiving them now, and it's pretty standard to other agencies, so I will highlight those sections relative to what I think would be straightforward. Maybe that's a way to
Okay.
get that done.
I want to go back up to the executive search, because I don't think we quite closed the loop on the subcommittee conversation. Commissioner, last week we had talked about having the law firm look into the issue. It sounds like they have, but they weren't ready to come to talk about it, or?
They have, Mr. Chairman, and they've prepared a brief memorandum. Reviewing that memorandum and talking with them led me to desire more concrete assurances than I think we can get without going to a more authoritative source and
Okay.
getting some review. So what I thought that I would do would be to draft two scenarios, one involving a single commissioner acting as the selection person, and one involving a subcommittee with the scenarios that follow from that, and see if I could get some advice from an authoritative source as to the consequences of following both procedures, and then come back to you with what I learned on those
Okay.
procedures.
Is that reasonably next week, do you think? Or
I would
you're carrying a lot of water here.
Yeah, I would certainly strive to do that by next week, yes.
Okay.
I have no control over the outside
Yeah, okay.
source.
Well, obviously, it would be good if it could be next week, but if you've got a lot of stuff on your desk, and if there's anything else we can rearrange to make sure there's an equitable load here, that would be good
Okay,
too.
I'll
Okay.
see what we can do.
Okay. Okay, so we'll try for next week. If it works, great. If it doesn't, then we'll do it the week after that. Okay, 3D, Commissioner Zuniga, the project management consultant.
Yes, thank you. We have here Scott Libby and others from PMA. We invited them today in the same venue as our executive search firm as we are implementing our contracting relationship with them, to come and introduce themselves, give a little bit of an overview of the tool that we are talking about.
Before you start, could you
Yep.
just take a quick break?
Sure.
Okay.
We sure can.
Yeah.
You're the chair.
Okay, pick up where we left off. Sorry, introduce our guests.
Thank you. Yes, if Scott, could you introduce yourselves for the record and, proceed with the overview as we talked about?
Great. Thanks very much. I'm Scott Libby. First, on behalf of PMA, I want to thank you, the commission, for allowing us to respond to the solicitation for the project management and scheduling services. We're really happy to be here. As requested last week, we're here just to give an abbreviated version of our presentation that were given to a few of the commissioners a few weeks ago. Our presentation's been structured today, real quick scenario of who PMA is, followed by a demonstration of a scheduling tool we have that helps us manage our projects with our owners. I'm a principal with PMA and also be serving as the senior project manager for this assignment. I have with me today Eric Lothar and Angel Arvello, who will be assisting in the management and scheduling services for this assignment. Quick summary about PMA. We primarily project and program managers, primarily working for public owners. We've been in business for over 40 years. We have 180 employees nationally. One of our largest offices is our local office in Braintree. We have about 45 employees. We're a certified MBA firm, and as noted, locally, we dedicate most of our services to working with public owners. Today, some of the tools that I'll be having Eric speak to and Angel, we believe are some of the best in class out there, working directly with owners, helping solve program and project management needs from project inception through completion. We believe this interactive tool is a great way to communicate real-time results, allowing what-if scenarios during live meetings. We believe this is going to be a true benefit to this commission. So enough of that. I'm going to turn it to Eric and have him give a quick demonstration of some of these tools.
Thanks, Scott. Again, my name is Eric Lothar. Angel and I will be presenting today on schedule. Schedule is our passion, and this is really what we do every day. And I think whenever you undertake a big complex program like this, it's imperative that you have a complete schedule that really envisions and captures all the scope. And for a management tool, it's indispensable. You may have found even this far that what happens is as you engage experts and consultants and development partners, they all bring with them their schedules. And generally, their schedules are a great asset. They in great amount of detail present their expertise and their scope, but often it ends there and there's a handoff, an exchange, where they develop a work product and hand it to somebody else. The problem, though, with those independent schedules that aren't integrated, if a change happens in one, it doesn't waterfall, it doesn't cascade through the rest of the consultants in the overall project schedule. So you don't understand the impact if a date moves. And so it's imperative that you have an integrated, comprehensive schedule, and that's our expertise. To help bring the commission and the rest of the stakeholders as a part of this initiative to put together, get everyone's great ideas into a critical path schedule so that you can manage your project to the deadlines that you'd like to establish. And so that's what we do. We facilitate those stakeholder meetings. We host those sessions and invite the stakeholders in and ask those questions about what is it that you need to be successful in order to start developing your work product. And that's the beginning of the integration. Okay, I need the other consultants' deliverable on a certain date in order to move forward. And that's a give and take that happens over a series of meetings to actually build that network. The result is a schedule that empowers your decision-making. It prioritizes what you need to be focused on because you identify the critical tasks and you understand what has some flexibility and some float, and maybe you can delay that decision or that award for a week without impacting your overall program. That makes you a very effective management body to understand those specifics about your project. And obviously, that also is a great communication tool. One of the things that we've developed to help with that facilitation process is a software called NetPoint. And Angel's going to just switch to that tool just briefly. One of the roadblocks to good integration and planning is commercially available software often is very complex. There's a very steep learning curve to actually utilizing the software. And that pushes away stakeholders, and they don't become involved in the planning process. And you really need to have everybody engaged in part of that process. The more engaged all your stakeholders are, the more ownership they have of the plan. And so obviously that's something that we want to instill, is ownership in the place that people achieve their dates that we're planning. And so this obviously is NetPoint. This is a very simplistic schedule, a series of activities tied together. And the difference between this software and other commercially available software is that if you make a change, you instantly see what it means to your project end date. As you can see here in this red milestone, this required date is a hypothetical completion date of the project. And as you can see now, this network is completing before that. But for example, if programming didn't go as planned and went longer, you can instantly see how that affects the overall network. You've passed your 5/1 target date, and as a result, the whole schedule, or the critical path of the schedule, pops red, and you understand you have a problem. Recognizing you have a problem, you can work backwards to figure out how you might modify your overall process to win back some time and achieve your anticipated milestone. So at a very summary level, that is the real advantage of this particular software, and as well as our experience in facilitating and understanding of critical path method that really brings quite a bit of power to the process. So I don't know if you could switch to a little bit more robust example. This is a little bit more detailed plan. Project at this size, you're going to have stakeholders providing schedules with thousands and thousands of activities. If you print that out on a computer, it's going to look like the Boston phone book. And you're not going to have time to understand that on a monthly basis, what is there. Part of the service that you can provide is actually summarizing all of that detail into a more summary level so you can understand when tasks are happening and how it's changed since the last update. If you were to change any of those details in the bars, you can actually see how the summary bars are adjusted automatically as well. It's a pretty neat tool. If we could go to the next example. This particular example demonstrates loading cost to tasks in your schedule. So if you wanted to model how your cash flow is going to be consumed during the life of your project, you put your budget on your tasks. And as things move around, you can see how that spend is going to happen. Very helpful with planning financially for your program. You notice here that one of the peaks actually turned red. And, that allows you to demonstrate the functionality of setting limits to how much money you think would be reasonable or that you can support in any given period of time. And if your plan is indicating that you're going to exceed that, that's good information. You can modify your plan and adjust the durations and sequences to actually bring it below what you believe is a reasonable threshold. And just like cost, you can do similar functionality with resources. And the next example is this particular example is a construction schedule, and it's loaded with trades, various construction trades. And it's very important to anybody involved with the construction industry to understand how many tradespeople are going to be available and necessary on site. And this is a great tool to forecast when particular trades and particular peaks in your work are going to occur. And often there's an understanding of what the limits of a certain resource might be. And if you're forecasting exceeding a particular limit on resources, identify that, adjust your plan to level that out, and not exceed your resources. Obviously, a schedule that plans on exceeding resources isn't going to be achieved because those resources aren't going to arrive on your project. They're not going to work your site, and you're going to slip schedule. So, in a nutshell, that's the tool. I look forward to working with the commission and the rest of the stakeholders to develop that plan and really lay out that first baseline schedule, that schedule progress will be measured upon as we move forward through the project. Would you like to get back to Scott?
So we kept it real brief. That is basically a quick drive-through of our product, our tool. More than happy to answer questions, comments you may have. This obviously was a much larger presentation a few weeks ago. Got into a lot more of the nuts and bolts, but I think you see the general user-friendly, result-oriented nature. In the industry, a lot of this was done, we'll call it the black box. Data was taken, compressed, compiled, an entry database type system. Hit go, it would calculate, it would spit out the answers, you'd go back, you'd say, hey, this isn't going to work. We saw a way to get around that, and now we can do these what-ifs live. So communicating with our clients who may not be schedule savvy, construction management savvy, this can be used beyond construction projects. Again, program management, managing your own internal resources, your needs, staffing. We see this having a wide variety of opportunity, and it's a great management tool, not only for us, but also for our owners.
You don't have to sell us, because we already bought it, and I'm thrilled. I mean, I think that's exactly what we've been talking about. It looks terrific. This is a proprietary tool, right?
Correct.
But it's a proprietary tool which we can take over and operate on our own in due course if we get there, right?
Absolutely.
Right, okay. So, because I think our assumption has been, nothing's cast in stone, but our assumption has been that we would work with you to get our system loaded and then train our own people to be able to manage it on an ongoing basis. And I just want to make sure that was, as like I said, nothing's cast in stone, right? But I think that's what our presumption was. I just want to make sure that was, we could do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think it's very exciting. You know, we're anxious, this Eileen Glovsky, whom I just mentioned, we made it clear to her this morning that one of her top priorities will be to work with you and with our consultants to pour the project management chart that we already have for much of our work into this and start turning it into a critical path document, as well as adding to it all of the other elements of our work that aren't in there yet. So we're anxious to get started.
As part of our first, kind of kickoff planning working sessions, since we'll work out with you, we'll go through some of the nitty-gritty details and pitfalls and successes, just to help some framework around the whole process.
Great. Now, do you have a process? We've signed our contract, right, or we will in the
We
next day or
will,
so?
we will sign it very
Yeah.
shortly. We have agreed on all the terms, essentially.
And
but,
is
we'll
there a
sign it.
need to, is there a process for moving forward, starting now, or?
Well, yeah, it's really up to us to, and to, coordinating our own schedules.
Right.
But one of the thoughts was to make the current schedule that we have from our consultants to help you sort of look at it and see what upload can be done, and then also schedule a session with our consultants or Eileen or both relative to that kickoff that you talk about. One assumption was that we would need a facilitated session. The venue, we'd still have to figure out if it's in a public meeting like this or not, but a session that will help us review all the initial assumptions.
Right. Well, I think you're going to end up being our contact person.
Okay.
For the next 11 days or 12 days,
Right.
at least until Eileen gets on board, and I think we are ready to start. So
Yep.
if you're willing to just
Yep, absolutely.
keep moving that ball forward, and again, the consultants are here, you can, make a connection now relative to this first document. If you want to. Great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Very
Yeah, thank
exciting.
you. That's great.
Thank you.
I forgot a second item that I had wanted to ask our consultants. Bob and Guy and Fred, if you wouldn't mind coming back for a couple minutes. I had mentioned there was one other thing I just wanted to get some feedback from you on, and I forgot to do it. Could you guys come back just for a sec? Pardon? Oh, you haven't come up yet?
Yes.
Oh, what am I saying? I couldn't figure out why you looked so glazed. Sorry. Whoa. That wasn't on live. Talk about senior moments.
Well, you just got back. You
Yeah,
just got back.
You just got
Wow.
that. You're still in South Dartmouth.
I'm going back to vacation. Sorry, okay. Let's go to item 4. You are Commissioner Cameron, yeah, right. No, I'm kidding.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, I have 2 tentative decisions to file with the full commission today. And the process will be that I'll just give you a brief synopsis of the hearings I held, my recommendations, and then there'll be a 30-day period in which the appellant will have the opportunity to object to the decisions. And information can be submitted in writing to the full commission, which we will review at that time if there is an objection, and a final decision will be made after a 30-day period. So when I present, that'll be the process we'll be using moving forward. So these 2 particular cases, the first one is the matter of Richard Retamosa. And the procedural history, I, on behalf of the commission, conducted a formal adjudicatory proceeding on June 21st. I was the presiding officer. This was due to the appeal of Mr. Retamosa. He was a patron at Suffolk Downs. He was ejected by the state police on November 17th, 2011. He was present at the hearing, and he was not represented by counsel. The witnesses in this case were Trooper Winnie Rennie of the State Police and Stewart Susan K. Walsh, and Mr. Retamosa testified on behalf of himself. The following documents, there was the ejection report, request for appeal, and the notice of the hearing itself were accepted at that point. A bill of sale from a horse and checks showing the sale of the horse were also accepted into evidence. The findings of fact in this matter established beyond a preponderance of the evidence, the appellant was a former horse trainer for Patricia and Daniela Mafford. In 2011, the appellant was working for the Maffords. He had a dispute with the Maffords. He believed that they owed him money. Without proper licensure or authority, he sold the horse in New York for $3,000. He is not, the appellant is not able to recover the horse. However, on November 12, 2011, he agreed to pay the Maffords $2,700 from the proceeds of the sale. He has also been arraigned on criminal charges for selling the horse. To date, the appellant has not repaid the Maffords the $2,700 from the sale as promised. And as a result of failing to make the payment, he was ejected from Suffolk Downs by the state police on November 17th. Just the applicable law in this matter, the commission or representative, in this case it would have been the state police, have the right to refuse admission or to eject from the premises any person whose presence is detrimental in the sole judgment of the commissioner or the representative in this matter. Based on the finding of fact, the commission has the jurisdiction to hear this matter. And based on the finding of fact, the appellant's conduct constitutes valid ground for ejection. Discussion with regard to this matter. Undisputed that the appellant was not authorized by law or by the owners to seize and sell the horse of his employer. Undisputed that after this sale, he agreed to pay his employer, the Maffords, $2,700 from the proceeds, and has yet failed to do so. I, on behalf of the commission, found that the ejection under such circumstances was appropriate, although the appellant may be entitled to certain funds. He did not have the right to take matters into his own hands, legal matters. Whether the criminal charges are appropriate is not within our jurisdiction. But the conduct was dishonest, unprofessional, and detrimental to the proper and orderly conduct of a racing meeting. Appropriate sanctions in the circumstance maintain that the exclusion from the racetrack until the appellant has made restitution of the $2,700 as originally promised. Prior to this being done, the ejection is confirmed and the exclusion shall remain. So I recommend that the full commission uphold the ejection, and we would lift the ejection of the appellant upon the state police receiving satisfactory confirmation that the appellant has repaid the Maffords the $2,700. As I mentioned earlier, this is a tentative decision on behalf of the commission. The appellant has hereby, will be notified in writing. This decision will be sent to him in writing. And he has the right to seek reconsideration of this tentative decision by filing written objections within 30 days. And at that time, the address is provided to him. The commission will not hold any additional hearings, but the written submission is his opportunity to make any further argument regarding this matter. The commission will review the matter and any explanation, the receipt from the appellant. And after that 30 days, whether or not there is an objection, a final decision will be made by the commission. So I am, at this time, filing this tentative decision with the commission. And I have a...
Do we want to discuss that at all?
Well, it's really premature to discuss it, Mr. Chairman. This is just being filed today.
Okay.
And Commissioner Cameron's giving us this summary so we know what's being filed, but the next step procedurally is the notification that Commissioner Cameron said would go out, and the objections and the papers filed by the appellant, if the appellant disagrees. And then we have another open discussion of it, at which time we make a decision. So that's the process now. And it, for the full commission to begin to deliberate on this before we hear the appeal would be premature.
I have an observation slash question. That there appears to be a typo on page 2, the findings of fact number 3. At the end of that, it says 3,00. I believe you noted it was 3,000. There's a 0 that might be missing.
It's 3,000, yes.
3,000. You said correctly.
Okay, we'll make that correction. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, the second matter is a tentative decision in the matter of Walter Case. I, on behalf of the Commission, conducted a formal adjudicatory proceeding on June 21st, 2012. And the matter was held pursuant to an appeal by Walter Case, the appellant, an applicant for a driver's license. The applicant was denied a license by the Plain Ridge Racecourse judge, ruling, finding that the appellant lacked the requisite integrity.
Driver's license, meaning
Yes, in a harness,
Yeah, okay.
sulky, yes. The appellant was present at the hearing and represented by counsel. The witnesses that testified were Plain Ridge Racecourse Judge Lawrence Rooney, Plain Ridge Racecourse Judge Sal Panzera, and Trooper Joseph Sinkovich of the Massachusetts State Police. Mr. Case testified, a Harold Raymond and a Joseph Fitzgerald testified also. Took administrative notice of the following documents: the ruling number 1001-12 denying the application for the license, a request for appeal from the appellant, and the letter notifying the appellant of a hearing. Numerous pieces, too numerous to mention here, were accepted into evidence on both sides in this matter. And with regard to a finding of fact, I found by a preponderance of evidence that the predecessor to our commission, the State Racing Commission, previously issued the appellant a license to practice as a driver in the Commonwealth. Specifically, he was licensed in 2008 and prior to that in 2000. In 2004, the appellant was convicted in Ohio of felonious assault against his wife, served approximately 4 years in prison. The appellant was released on probation, which terminated on or about December 5th, 2011. He was suspended from racing in Ohio in 2004 after multiple racing-related violations. Been denied a license in Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Maryland. At this time, the appellant is not licensed in any jurisdiction. Was licensed in Massachusetts in 2008 by unanimous decision of the 3 Plain Ridge judges. The decision was not reviewed by the State Racing Commission. The decision to issue a license to the appellant in 2008 came prior to the completion of the state police background checks. On April 26, 2012, the appellant's application for a 2012 racing driver's license in Massachusetts was denied by unanimous decision, 3 Plain Ridge judges. Of these judges, 2 of the judges one of the judges who made the decision this time did rule to provide a license in 2008. He was not present. The other 2 judges who testified were not part of the team that presided over the 2008 matter. The commission does have discretion to refuse to grant a license in any applicant from a license or to revoke or suspend a license in this matter. Based on the findings of fact, the commission has jurisdiction to hear this matter. Based on a finding of fact, the appellant's conduct constitutes valid ground for denial of a license. Brief discussion of this matter. I, on behalf of the commission, received evidence and testimony regarding the application for licensure for the appellant. During the hearing, the evidence demonstrated that the appellant, after multiple racing violations, was denied a license from the state of Ohio in 2004. The same year, the appellant was convicted of assault of his wife, 4-year prison sentence, as well as lengthy probation. Such a serious matter could justify a blanket denial of the appellant's racing license. The Supreme Judicial Court has held that when considering its discretion to deny a license, the commission must take into account the public interest in determining what action in particular circumstances will conform to the usual standards of public convenience, health, safety, morals, welfare. The appellant did not dispute the facts presented at the hearing, nor the serious nature of the criminal and racing background. He instead asked me, on behalf of the commission, to take into account mitigating testimony, the fact that he was licensed in 2008 after the criminal conviction. He has not engaged in any wrongful conduct since 2004. He raced for just a couple of weeks in 2008. The period of licensure in Massachusetts passed without incident, so he did not have any violations in those couple of weeks. He moved from Ohio to New York, which did not allow him to leave the state while on probation, so he hasn't applied since 2008. Again, I was mindful of the overarching goal of the public protection, acting in the best interest of racing. In that end, I took note of the fact that the 2008 license, as well as the fact that the appellant is not licensed in any other state. As to the previous decision, I found on behalf of the commission that we are not bound by that 2008 decision made by those judges at Plainridge at the time. The evidence in the record showed that a full review of the record was not made in 2008. For example, the decision was made prior to a completion of the state police background investigation. None of the judges were available to testify, and the granting of the license in 2008 was not made or reviewed by the State Racing Commission. Although the appellant seeks a license in Massachusetts, it does not appear that he has a long history of racing in Massachusetts. Prior to 2008, he was licensed in 2000. Has been denied in numerous other jurisdictions, again, New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Ohio, Pennsylvania. The appellant did testify that some of those states might be willing to reconsider their decisions. To this date, he holds no other licenses. And when questioned as to why he wanted a license in Massachusetts, he testified that he enjoyed his time here. I did not find that to be a credible response. In contrary, it appears that the appellant seeks a license in Massachusetts primarily as a means to get licensure in other states. In reviewing the full record, I recommend to the Commission that the licensure of the appellant in Massachusetts be denied based on the severe nature of the appellant's criminal record, in particular a crime of violence. The record since the conviction, although void of any new crimes, does not contain any evidence that the appellant has attempted to rehabilitate himself or conduct any charitable acts to mitigate his crimes of the past. All of this is in the record in evidence that the appellant was, it is in evidence that he was a skilled driver. It is such areas of moral character that the Commission must take into consideration with this decision. Again, it appears that he committed violent crime, served his sentence, and now wishes to restart his career here in Massachusetts. Such a decision, however, is not in the best interest of racing and is not in the best interest of the public health, safety, morals, and welfare. In conclusion, I recommend that the commission uphold the denial of the licensure of the appellant. Again, this is a tentative decision. The appellant will be notified in writing of his right to seek reconsideration of this tentative decision by filing written objections within 30 days, at which time the commission will take this matter. Whether or not an objection is filed, we will make a final decision at that time. Again, no additional hearings, no additional arguments. The sole opportunity is a written objection that the commission will review at that time before a final decision is made. So these are the two decisions I will be filing today with the full commission. There is one.
So that's where you've been.
That's where I've been, yes. There is one final decision. The individual did not appear at the hearing, and I will be reporting out on that next week.
Right? And you're saying it's really not appropriate for us to discuss it at this point, okay. What about the status of the consultant report? Where do you see that in the pipeline?
Well, the consultant is preparing a draft report for the full commission to review. I believe she will be ready as soon as next week to come before the commission to report on her findings.
Okay, so that would be, so the draft would be ready to be circulated hopefully by the end of the week. So we would have a chance to have read it.
Review it
prior to
before the,
yeah.
before the commission meeting. That's accurate, Mr. Chair.
Okay, great. Anything else on racing? What about our field trip?
I know the Chief of Staff is working on dates, and I know it's been a little difficult with everyone's summer schedules, both at the track and with the commissioners. So,
Right.
Chief, that's a work in progress?
Okay. Okay. Item 5, project work and work plan. First is the notice of proposed rulemaking. Commissioner McHugh, do you have some anything to say about this?
Mr. Chairman, we did have, as we've discussed at several meetings, a notice of proposed rulemaking that we published. The end date for the comments was last Saturday. We received a total of 6 comments, 2 of which I have circulated for such discussion as is appropriate today. The other 4 I will circulate to you for your review. They were thoughtful but didn't involve the degree of, they were very short, but they were thoughtful, and I'll circulate them to the rest of the commission. The 2 that were received, one from the Suffolk Downs interests and the other from the MGM interests, are in the meeting packet. The one from DLA Piper on behalf of Sterling Suffolk Racecourses, Sterling Suffolk Racecourse, focused on 5 elements that we have focused on in one way or another and that are embodied in, and perhaps we can discuss that when we hear from the gaming consultants. Focused on, first of all, exercising discretion with respect to how deep into the corporate structure the qualifying examinations had to go. That's been a topic that we've discussed with the consultants regulations that they'll unveil here today do deal with that in a general sense. We'll have an opportunity to look at those regulations and to consider that more as we go forward. The second comment that they made was that They hoped that the commission would use the multi-state application form because the gaming interests are used to that, and the sooner the commission made a decision and announced that decision publicly to use the multi-state application form, the sooner potential applicants could begin to fill it out. The commission is going to use the multi-state application form with a supplement, and how we announce that and the like, we can consider soon. The third, I should say, interest was a comment that concerned the need for confidentiality. The suggestion was that we use the Bureau of Investigations and Enforcement to do all the background checks so as to ensure confidentiality for law enforcement investigatory matters. That doesn't ensure the degree of confidentiality I think that they're seeking, but the regulations that are in draft now do deal with that, both the public records regulations and the other regulations. We're very cognizant of the need for confidentiality. It's a tricky matter, and we'll have an opportunity to discuss it more as we discuss the regs. But that matter is one that the commission, and we've talked about it, and we'll continue to talk about it, and the consultants have talked about it, is high on everybody's radar screen, or in the center of everybody's radar screen, I guess. Finally, they voiced a concern that that a mechanism be created to allow them to move forward with the developmental permitting pieces while this phase one process was in progress, and we've talked about that at other meetings. So I think that we've, in one way or another, addressed, are conscious of, I should say, the concerns that they raised, and need to remain conscious of those concerns and deal with them as we move forward. The second set of comments came from, were submitted on behalf of MGM. They really talked about two considerations. One, a global bifurcation process, and they suggested in these comments that would add, not subtract, time from the overall process, and recommended against it, against following a bifurcated process. And they've spelled out the reasons for their belief that it would add to the length of time. Candidly, we can all look at that and discuss it further, but I am not persuaded by the argument. It seems to me quite clear, and we've discussed this, we've discussed it with the consultants. We've been over this ground a number of times, and I think the contrary conclusion is manifest from the process that we're going through and the reasons for it. But succinctly, we get these regulations done, we get the regulations out, we get the investigatory process going while we're developing the rest of the regulations, rather than waiting until we've got that whole package at the end and then start the process. And I can't see how that could possibly extend the time. And then the second concern that they raised was had to do, I think, with something we discussed at least in a tentative sort of what-if manner last meeting, and that is, what about staggering the application process so that an unsuccessful bidder in a region where there was competition could file an application in a region where there was no competition. And their suggestion was that that's an unrealistic prospect. We can read what they've said and consider what they've said and the reasons for it, and then make a decision. So those were thoughtful and helpful comments, and that's a summary of what they are, but they're all there for everybody to read.
Great. Any comments on the comments on the comments?
You know, I would just agree with Commissioner McHugh that I don't see where the bifurcated process would slow down the process. And I've read the document, but think that your comments on the regulations and getting them done, the ones that we need right now, make a lot of sense for us moving forward.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, anything else on that topic?
No, that's the end. As I say, there are some other comments having to do with the criteria that we should use to judge applicants and the like, some thoughtful, helpful comments. 4 more, I'll circulate them to everybody, and we'll carefully consider them.
Do we somehow acknowledge a receipt of comments, or even just a general, thank you for your suggestions?
Yes,
Additional
and we
thing
will
under
do
that?
that now that the comment period has ended. I'll ensure that each of the commenters gets a personal thank you, and that we'll take the comments into consideration.
Great, thank you. Okay, now, the consultants, if you want to join us.
Good job. The whole team.
Nobody left in the office.
Yeah.
Why don't you introduce yourselves again for the public in particular, and then I think this agenda is pretty much in your hands.
Great. Guy Michael, Michael and Carol.
Bob Carroll, Michael and Carroll.
Bernie Murphy, Michael Carroll.
Frederick Gushin, Spectrum Gaming Group.
Michael at Spectrum Gaming Group.
I guess to get started, we can report on progress that's been made since we were here last, and we have completed the initial draft, as Commissioner McHugh mentioned earlier, and you have already discussed, the initial draft of the regulations for Phase 1. And in addition to the specific applicability of those regulations to Phase 1, it also covers some other administrative matters in setting up the commission and its functioning. They are in a very preliminary stage. They are subject to further review by ourselves and certainly by the commission. And we look forward to tailoring those and being able to tweak them to make them as effective and efficient as possible. In the process, there were a number of areas that came up that we are unable to complete until we get some further guidance from the commission on some policy matters. We'll be able to address a couple of those today. I'll take the first one. There was a question. We have been considering whether or not there might be some avenue by which the commission could either provide assistance to or some oversight of the municipalities and for the municipalities and the initial stages of this entire casino development process, wherein they are dealing with potential developers and incurring costs as a result of that, and developers are entering into preliminary agreements with those municipalities to pay them for those costs. An initial idea, which we have floated after discussion, is the possibility of drafting a regulation by which certain payments by developers to municipalities, payments that we would further refine and define in the regulations, would require disclosure by those developers and the municipality to the commission. Not that those payments would be then either approved or disapproved by the commission, but the disclosure would serve as somewhat of a disinfectant to the possibility of payments that might not be arm's length. And at the same time, if payments were made that were not disclosed, that would be something that could become an issue in the subsequent license investigation should that developer later become an applicant. So that's one way that we had talked about dealing with that issue, but we're obviously open to any suggestions and comments and any other ideas.
Just to be clear on this, I think we were particularly concerned about the stage prior to a developer becoming an applicant.
Right.
Because there are communities and developers that are doing work together now. Communities are incurring funds. These developers may or may not ultimately go on and make a proposal. these communities may or may not become host or surrounding communities. Once you become a host or a surrounding community, the statute's pretty good at making sure that there's figure out a way to get you covered. But we have been talking in another context about how we can just give technical support and advice to any community that is a prospective surrounding or host community. And we're going to continue to do that, and we're talking with people who can fulfill this ombudsman role. This is taking that to a step further where we would incorporate that process in our regs. And then the new thought is that so it's sort of a two-step process that we talked about a little bit at a preliminary meeting. One is that we will encourage cities and towns, we will advise cities and towns on how they can get their costs covered, how they might go about doing that. And we will require that if there is any such payment from any developer to any prospective surrounding or host community, that be disclosed to the commission. So that's the sort of restating what we talked about.
That's the concept, and we'll be developing language to submit to you in that regard.
Can I put that just in a little bit further context, both for primarily for the benefit of the audience watching? What we're doing right now is trying to, and maybe this is obvious and I don't need to do it, but what we're trying to do now is prepare a set of draft regulations for publication through the regulation adoption process so that people can comment publicly on the final draft before the regulations go into effect. So when we say adopt as a matter of policy, we're really talking about a policy judgment that we're making, subject to rethinking it during the comment period before the regulations become final.
Right.
And the second piece of this is that the statute does call for, to put this specific discussion in the context, the statute does call for reimbursement of expenses by cities and towns from the application fee that's filed when an applicant becomes an applicant. And the issue here is there a mechanism for cities and towns getting funds with which to engage council and developers before the application occurs? And this is what this is aimed at. So I just thought that was a context for people who are not in the room and at the table.
Yeah, on to the next one. During the, excuse me, during the next few weeks, there'll be obviously more detailed review of the draft regulations that have been submitted. And, as the chair and as Commissioner McHugh have indicated, the public comment period will also be in the near future. One of the other areas that we had talked about is regarding the actual language of certain regulations. We have included some options in the drafts for both a general and a specific form of the regulation. There's a balance that we understand has to be struck from the point of view of the Secretary of State in terms of using regulations that are informative yet concise, not necessarily editorializing, but have specific functions and specific directions. Using that as a standard that we're trying to adhere to, but also understanding that we need enough information in these regulations that not only the applicants but that the public can be informed as to the specific function of each regulation. We've included alternatives, and those alternatives have, in some cases, more specificity. All have sufficient specificity to be passed for consideration as they are. But we felt that in some areas, because of either the complexity or the interrelationship with other areas, that it warranted further explanation. So you'll find through the document there are a couple of different areas that have alternatives, and we would invite your review of those and certainly the Commission's viewpoints as to what you are most comfortable with in terms of future enactment. Number 3?
I'm not going to do that one. I think one of the other issues we came up with was, that we have need guidance, is there's a section 15.03 in the draft regulations that deals with the investigation by the IBE, the Bureau. And there's language in that provision that says that the Bureau cease any further review at a certain time and refer the matter to the Commission. We've been struggling with that because it seemed to us that it would be an inefficient process if the Bureau were to cease review of an investigation at mid-investigation and refer individual matters to the Commission on a piecemeal basis. The result could be that the Commission might disagree with the recommendation of the Bureau that this was a disqualifying event, and then remand it back, and you've spent all that time, and it wastes time. So it was our preference that the Bureau be able to complete its investigation before any report is submitted to the Commission as a whole. We have looked through the statute and the intention of the legislature, and we believe that despite the language of cease any further review, that language was inserted at a time before this bifurcation process was contemplated, and that as a result, what the legislature meant was that the ceasing of the further review was at the completion of the background portion, so that then the Commission could review that before it goes on to the developmental portion. That fits perfectly into now this bifurcated process. And so we have drafted the regulations in the alternative, but our preference would be that the Bureau be allowed to complete its background investigation, not have to report back to the Commission every time it finds something that it thinks is questionable. And that only on, as I say, the full completion of the background, the Commission make its final determination. Because of the ambiguity of the language, we've also included an alternative draft in which there would be an early denial process, which would be the one I described earlier that may be less efficient, but it would be up to the Commission to decide which of those that it preferred.
Another area involved the Code of Ethics. I'd like to point out also that the proposed regulations that we've submitted are for the Phase 1 qualification phase only. They also have in it areas of reservation for the inclusion and expansion of other sections that would fit into the overall matrix and would be applicable to the Phase 2 portion of the Commission's overall review of the total application. In addition to that, the Code of Ethics was originally thought might be included as a subsection of the regulations. Conferences were held with the Attorney General's office and with Anderson and Krieger, the legal advisor. And after a thorough discussion along with the Commission, it's been concluded that it appears that for the ease of inclusion, that it would be best to put the ethics provisions as a separate code and not be simply a Commission regulation. That is being worked on by Anderson and Krieger, that is being separately submitted, and there is a section reserved for it in the regulations, but based on the Attorney General's input and the legal counsel, it appears that that is the best alternative, and that is our recommendation. So that's being separately submitted to you also.
And you've, Commissioner McHugh has agreed with that?
Yes, yes, and that's going forward. The code is going forward in discussions with the Attorney General, the State Police, and the ABCC, Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission, all of whom, along with us, are required to have this enhanced code of ethics. So that's proceeding on that front.
Okay. We'll do this one. Deadline? Well, the other issues is that the regulations now provide for a firm deadline regarding the submission of the application, that a complete application has to be submitted as of a date certain, and that no applications filed subsequent to that date certain would be accepted, and that applicant would be have no opportunity for further review. Discussions among us, we have thought that it would be fair only to provide you with an opportunity for analysis of whether that's an adequate procedure, or whether you as a commission should be given some authority under the regulation to extend that deadline, either on the basis of extraordinary circumstances, hurricane or
earthquake or something, or on the basis of an individual case where there is a slight incompleteness in the application that can be cured in a day or two, and not disallow that applicant from being able to continue for that maybe an insignificance. We've also provided in the regulations a standard for completeness that were criteria that to determine whether or not the application is complete when it is filed. It's not an easy determination to make sometimes. It's not like crossing off little check marks on an outline. And so we've provided some standards for completeness. So we offer to you for your consideration whether there should be that firm deadline or whether or not you should have the discretion to extend it in the interest of fairness.
I have a question, and is this something that we should be talking about in each one of them? That date certain would refer to RFA Phase 1,
Phase 1,
correct?
yes.
Because all that we've been talking about is Phase 1 in these regulations.
Right. This is, these regulations govern Phase 1, right? There are some minor aspects of them, especially in terms of the structural aspects of the commission that would also affect Phase 2, but they are not intended to be applicable to anything but this Phase 1 process.
Just as a point of clarification, remember that prior to the filings, there'll be a series of meetings to discuss the scope of licensing, which entities and which individuals will be required to file in conjunction with the application form. So when the date of application comes, the applicants involved should have a very clear understanding of who has to file and which entities have to file.
I would be of the opinion and in favor of allowing the flexibility of curing minor pieces rather than, with a date, with a target date, but the ability to cure these applications will be lengthy. The scope of licensing will determine perhaps any number of iterations for each of the individuals. So it's quite important.
I suspect you've seen this both ways, correct?
Yes. Yes.
The hard and fast, as well as the ability to correct minor issues.
Yes, yes.
And have you seen them both work well? Do you see one working
Yeah.
better than the other?
Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead. Flexibility is fairer, and actually in the administration of almost all of these rules, the commission's flexibility is an important aspect. You shouldn't hamstring yourself too tightly in terms of administering this process. The applicants and the people under your jurisdiction need to have guidance as to what kinds of decisions you're going to make. But in the end analysis, those decisions shouldn't be constrained by some set of rules that you've preordained. You have to be able to analyze things on a case-by-case basis as best you can.
Okay.
But it's important to note that you're talking about minor omissions, but not an omission of materiality that someone chose not to include and then later wanted to go back and fill in because they thought. So you can't leave something out and then get a second chance. It's if you find things that are minor discrepancies in the application, you give them an opportunity to cure that, but you still hold a standard with respect to materiality.
Thank you.
And the same would be true of the deadline, I take it. You'd recommend that for extraordinary circumstances, say that the deadlines could be extended, but the circumstances would have to be extraordinary.
Yeah. Not my dog ate it.
Yeah, right.
Pardon me?
My dog ate it.
That's how you get the homework.
Yeah, right.
Doesn't work in gaming.
Right.
But it's so important under your system when a company becomes an applicant, that designates official status and the clock starts running on the investigation and all those other things. So that's a big deal essentially.
Especially in a competitive environment where the others are complying.
Yes.
It's fair.
Yeah.
So can we, do we have a consensus here now? I mean, we might as well begin to
Yeah,
knock
sure.
these things off
Right.
as we talk about them. The flexibility, both with respect to the deadlines, extraordinary circumstances, they can be extended, and immaterial omissions can be cured ought to be part of the regulatory regime.
Great.
Favor that.
I would agree with that.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
A similar issue involves the ability to withdraw, an applicant withdrawing an application. That has, it's practiced different ways in different jurisdictions. I would say the majority, or maybe a little bit over halfway point, might be that they require the permission of the regulatory agency before an applicant can withdraw. Now, withdrawal can occur for a lot of reasons. An applicant can lose interest in a project, can be unable to proceed in a project, but there's also situations where an investigation has continued and reached a certain point where information has been developed that may cause that particular applicant a problem. And there are instances where the applicant will choose, well, I probably am not going to get a license, or there's going to be revelations that are going to be harmful, so I want to withdraw. This is something that we want also some guidance on. Right now, the way the rules are set up, there is no real withdrawal set forth in the statute, so it's ripe for regulation treatment. It would be our recommendation that the commission withdraw, I think, wasn't it? Or
Yes,
consensus?
absolutely.
Polling everybody.
The commission controls the process, and any request for withdrawal has to be made to the commission, and the commission would then have to opine on that. If it's a technical matter, I don't think there would be any reasonable objection, but if it's a request to withdraw to avoid a denial, that may raise issues and certainly should be subject to commission review and approval.
In other words, that the applicant that cannot unilaterally
Correct.
withdraw.
Right.
Correct.
It's
Correct.
like
They
changing
have to
things on the
bring-
application
yes.
form after.
The application fee is non-refundable either way.
Correct.
Okay, but in terms of the substance of it, let's say they've submitted their forms, but things have come up. And maybe it's of a business nature that they decide that it's not in their best interest, and they notify the commission they'd like to withdraw, they don't want to participate any further. We believe the authority should stay with you as to whether that should allow that to happen, so you can examine it to determine whether it's a legitimate withdrawal or whether there was some other reason for the withdrawal. And
What's an illegitimate reason for withdrawing?
Well,
avoidance?
Avoidance of a
Why is that-
license.
Why is that an illegitimate reason?
Well, it can, an example I give you is if, let's say, a company that is in several jurisdictions, and they have a licensing investigation going in a jurisdiction, and they've been notified in that jurisdiction that they're going to be revoked, okay? And they have a pending matter here. They may come here and say that they want to withdraw. They may or may not, we would presume, hopefully they would disclose that they have a problem in another jurisdiction. But if they didn't, for example, and you found out through investigation that the reason they're withdrawing is not because they're having a downturn in business, but because they have a regulatory issue that's going to come out, and they're going to have a problem as to their integrity and so forth. We don't believe that's a valid reason for withdrawing at this point, and that should be something that you should review, get thoroughly briefed on the content of the information available, and then make a decision.
Also, there's a corollary to the withdrawal rule, and that is a bar on reapplication. So if, one of the reasons that typically jurisdictions want to have control over withdrawal is to make sure that someone can't just come back again 6 months later. If, again, using the example that Bob had mentioned, if someone goes through an entire investigation, it's discovered they have a serious problem, you've gone through all this process, you've spent all your man hours and woman hours doing this, and then they say, never mind, and they go away. Now, they've left the jurisdiction, so you've accomplished that goal. But nothing prevents them from then, after you've spent all this time and effort, having no record of it in other jurisdictions. Of course, the other jurisdictions could come to you and ask you about them, but they don't have a record of denial in their background. And there's no, there's no bar on their ability to just turn around and make you expend even more time and effort a year later. So that, there are pros and cons to it.
That seems to be a separable, the issue of reapplications if you withdraw or reapplications if you're denied, that seems to me to be one issue. But whether you can withdraw without the commission's approval is, to me, a separate issue. I mean, there might be a consequence, but you gotta get this one first, and just, it logically, intuitively, reflexively, it feels weird to me. How, you wanna get out, we don't let you out? I mean, how do you enforce that? You make them keep giving you the data, you,
I don't think that, I mean, I think it's clear that you wouldn't unreasonably withhold their ability to withdraw, but what you do is you review every application, and if there is a situation where you think that it requires further examination or it should go the distance, you have that ability to say that. So.
well, what would be such a
Well,
circumstance?
consider the following scenario. What if there's only one applicant for one region? And that applicant decides to withdraw. That withdrawal may put this commission in a scenario where we may or may not rebid for that region. Is that a feasible scenario?
Part of the other situation is if you've expended all of your resources and your economic, your effort to get to a certain point in an investigation, and the investigation is near the end, and it looks like it's gonna go bad, now they're gonna say, never mind, where, because you may have, or they anticipate you may have denied. You have a right to conduct your hearing and come to your conclusion, and if it's gonna be a denial, it's gonna be a denial, and you should be able to state your findings on the record and make your determination, as opposed to getting closer to the finish line, it not looking good, and they say, never mind.
There's
You know,
another,
what we're pointing up here, I think, in this debate is why we haven't drafted the rule
Right,
yet.
and we're trying to-
There are-
we're trying to give you some
there are-
advice on
there are
which way
two
we'd like you to
sides.
go,
There are
right.
two sides to this. Our recommendation, I'm not gonna say it's a tepid one, but it's a recommendation that we recognize the flaws in, but only because we have, our experience is that virtually every other jurisdiction, this is the practice. And it is found to have been worthwhile in most instances. And so we offer it to you as what is the standard practice and what is determined to be the best practice, but it isn't necessarily the only practice. And it's something that you can consider and decide on, depending on how you go out.
this discussion applies not only to gaming licenses, but it
Yes.
applies to all licenses.
Right. Vendor,
So
vendor,
that's-
and
that's
employee.
all the licenses, the many licenses that have to be given. So it's not a limited kind of thing. The second thing is there could be a connection, could there not, between the withdrawal and the consequences of the withdrawal. In other words, a regulation could be framed that says, if your reason is good, you can withdraw without prejudice. You can come back in 2 weeks if you and reapply again if you ran into some unexpected problem. On the other hand, if you are withdrawing to avoid a denial, the commission might say you can withdraw, but you can't come back for 180 days. We're not going to. So you could tailor the consequences of the withdrawal to the decision to allow or deny it.
That's right.
And it gives the commission some flexibility to, doing it that way would give the commission some flexibility to deal with a variety of situations that might come up where people elected to leave after the commission had invested a substantial amount of time in the process. And people simply wanted to avoid an undesirable result that would have a bar consequence, for example, an 180-day statutory bar. They want to withdraw that by jumping out just before the hammer was about to drop. But you could say, no, you can withdraw, but the hammer's still going to drop. So it sounds.
And we
it
could
gives
still
more
complete the
flexibility.
investigation, though.
Pardon me?
We'd have the ability to complete the investigation.
That would be one option.
But I just, how do you, I'm not sold on this. I mean, this doesn't make sense to me. It just, I mean, if a person, if they, for good reason or for bad reason, they don't want to be a bidder, for us to say, sorry, you gotta be a bidder, we want to find out your reason. We don't want to tell you our
You're not
reason.
saying-
So-
No,
I'm not forcing them to be a
We're not-
bidder.
No.
no,
Sorry.
but they've already bid, Steve. They've
You-
submitted a bid.
Well, you cannot withdraw,
Right.
so what do? Just, what,
Well,
No, you're only saying you can withdraw with the commission's approval. And there may be justified reasons in many cases, and in the isolated case, it may be a withdrawal with prejudice from refiling for a certain period of time. Or in a very isolated case, the investigation may be done, and maybe before the commission would have the option to deny a license if there's facts and circumstances which would justify that. So in almost all cases, you would be withdrawing. No one wants to expend and waste money conducting a hearing that may not be necessary, but it would be the whole point is it would be under the control of the commission as opposed to the applicant.
Well, I understand that, and I'm not seeing how the public interest is served by reserving that right, A. B, I'm not sure how you would enforce it. I mean, if you say, I want to withdraw, the commission says, why? They say, I don't want to tell you, then what do we say? You've got to tell us before you can withdraw?
One more basic
No.
example would be like, let's say that you've gone through 3/4 of the investigation, and the applicant may have a legitimate reason, so to speak, to withdraw, and he chooses to withdraw. But that particular inquiry has involved extended investigation, exceeding the amount of money that was paid, for example, in the application fee. And there's $100,000, for example, that's been run up in addition to that investigative fees. Now, if they turn around and say, I'm leaving, turn around and walk away, with a fee unpaid, wouldn't you want to retain the authority to be able to say, well, no, you gotta pay your bill before you go. We may let you out of this, but you also have responsibility to complete your obligations, okay?
They have a contractual obligation to pay that $100,000,
Well,
so
if
how
they
do we-
withdraw and they have authority to just withdraw, then they would view that that's a termination of any legal responsibility they would have.
Well, you could say,
Yeah, you could,
you could say, yes, you can withdraw, but you have to pay whatever's due and owing or whatever.
yeah, but that's why we believe the authority should stay with you to do that. That's our thinking.
Preserve.
I would characterize like, some of the other procurements that are done or that I was involved in my previous experience. When we request for proposals, the proposals have to remain in effect for a period of time. That's part of the request, so that, nobody's wasting time because they immediately withdraw. Because, we understand we cannot make them do things that they are not willing or able. But if you're submitting a proposal, you have to commit to a certain period of time, and whatever the terms of that proposal. So the parallel I'm driving here is if they're submitting a bid, that the commission have the flexibility, just like our consultants are saying, to allow them or not.
The problem here is, it is like that, but the problem is that this is a situation in which we're not asking for somebody to render services, to supply goods
Correct.
for a certain period of time. We're saying, in effect, you can't not perform personal services as a
Specific
consequence
performance,
of your desire to withdraw. And it seems to me that, and that is a difference, because it's a lot harder to enforce you have to run a casino, right? You don't want to run a casino, you have to. But it seems to me that in 98% of the situations in which somebody asks to withdraw, and the commission has the power to say yes or no, the answer is going to be yes, with some probably fair amount of yes buts, here's the consequences, and a couple of no's, here's, you've come very close to this is really bad, we don't want you coming back here, and so we're going to go ahead with the findings based on the investigation we've already conducted, and we're going to deny your license, you're going to be out anyway, but we're going to deny it on the merits. You can't just go away and hide. Now, that may be a rare situation, but there may be situations where that occurs, and we'd want to do that.
Yeah, I agree that we should retain that ability when someone gets that close to the finish line. Are you aware of cases where it came to that?
Well, that's typically the time people try to leave, is when, as the judge said, the axe is about to fall. And in fact, there's some jurisdictions that delay, that the permit withdrawal unilaterally up to a certain point, and then the permission to withdraw is triggered at a further point down the line, usually at the time it goes to a hearing, so, or after an objection is filed, or, you know, when it's clear that there's a problem. If you've gone that far, then you're gonna have to face the music.
I kind of like that approach a little bit better. Timeline to withdraw without any prejudice, or you continue going all the way through to the end, and only then do you have to come before the commission and explain your reason. Because I do want to catch the people that are withdrawing for legitimate reason, which wouldn't necessarily speak to their operational performance, but dictate, we obviously want to find the people that we don't want to come back.
Mhm.
So kind
Yeah,
of.
the timeline would be more
Timeline,
helpful
yeah.
without,
I react to this one with my, from the business part of my life as opposed to my public sector, and it feels counterintuitive. I don't see how it serves the public interest. I don't see how you enforce it constructively.
You don't see how the public interest, if there's very derogatory information, corrupt business practices that we've uncovered, and
Well, if
what
it's
by letting them withdraw, that does not come forward.
Well, if it's a criminal thing, there's a mechanism for dealing with a criminal activity. That's not our job, and if you're an hour before the meeting, I don't know, maybe there's a difference if the report's been written and everything, but, I mean, it seems to me that if you're a businessman and you decide you want to apply for something, you ought to be able to apply for it. If you want to get out of it, you ought to be able to get out of it. And if you want to get out of it because if it comes out, you're going to look like a jerk.
You've agreed to that background investigation where you know they're going to look at those issues, and I
Yeah.
just think you have an obligation at some point that's reasonable to, we have the ability to follow through with that investigation.
As Guy mentioned before, our experience, I mean, any operating commissions that we interact with, every agenda is gonna have withdrawal of applications, a whole bunch usually scheduled, and they're very perfunctory, The rare one that has
Right.
a problem or something is worthy of discussion. And like you said, the commission also wants the public perception that you're doing your job. And if you've done your job and you've effectively weeded out some entity or some person, it's, if that person wants to conceal that and, slither away, that should still be your call whether you'll allow that to happen.
But to the chairman's point, can somebody say, listen, I want to withdraw for whatever reason, and I understand, if it would be our intent to find somebody who isn't gonna operate in a, above board manner. But why don't you just say the immediate penalty is being barred from reapplying for such a period of time?
That's one option, yes.
Then the onus goes back onto that individual to really clearly
Sure.
think,
That's
do I
common.
withdraw, or I'm gonna see the hammer drop and
Yeah.
fine, I'm good with
But
2
that's-
years of being barred from reapplying. I don't know.
But if I'm understanding correctly, that's the option we want. That's subject to the commission's determination at that time.
No, this would be, you
This
want to
would be-
withdraw, fine, you can withdraw, but the
Fine, withdraw, but
consequence is X.
This is what
Right.
You can't come back for a year or 2 years or 6 months or whatever.
I mean, suppose somebody has a perfectly legitimate reason for withdrawing.
The
Why would you
98.
wanna-
Well, if I were doing it this way, I'd say that the commission has the option of granting a special permission to come back. If you came back if you dropped out because there was a hurricane that wiped out your operations.
Yeah, or your financing just dried up, and you wanna go back and reconstitute reload your coffers.
Right.
Right.
I guess I'm trying to make a simple comparison to, say, a job applicant. I want to apply for this job for whatever reason, they want to pull my name out of consideration. I wouldn't necessarily bar that person.
That's where maybe that timeline where there's a period of time when it's really unilateral. And there's a point at which it falls within your discretion.
Really, that's what the next couple of weeks are for in terms of your review and internal discussion on that and what you feel. And then, we could, it's easy enough for us to draft it with any bells and whistles that you feel
Yeah.
would be appropriate, so.
Well, it feels to me like we have as you referred to it, as a tepid consensus, or a consensus majority view that we should have there be some kind of commission control. So why don't you take a stab at trying to,
Couple of alternatives.
some kind of a, graceful way to do it, and then we can keep talking and look at it.
Draft a tepid regulation.
Right. Tepid but graceful.
Tepid rules. All right. The last one then is the application fee, and the discussion that has been raised previously and I think has not yet been resolved, in which we need, in order to finalize the regulation, is when that application fee must be filed. Is it filed at the point of the receipt of the application? Is it filed at the point of the filing of the application? Is there somewhere in between where it might be filed? There's some in discussion earlier today. A suggestion was raised that there be that anyone can receive an application, but there then be a time period prior to the filing of the application when your good faith and seriousness has to be demonstrated, and you must file the application fee. It gives people the opportunity to review the application and see what it is that's required of them before they write a check. But all of those options are open.
And then just to clarify this situation a little bit, because it ties into other things we've been talking about, we've come up with this protocol for interacting with state agencies, which is still in gestation. But what we agreed pretty much that when a company pays its $400,000 application fee, that's when they become an applicant. The question then became, when do they pay the $400,000? And some of us, including me, I was thinking that this would be right at the time we announce it on, say, October 15th. You come get your application, you give your $400,000, you're an applicant. And from that time forward, whatever the benefits are of being an applicant, benefits, responsibilities would accrue. But we realized that this might be on the web, you might be downloading it, so we hadn't figured out really when in the transaction. So Commissioner McHugh, I think, suggested that there could be a period of time, say again hypothetically October 15th, we issue the RFA 1. We might say that within 30 days thereafter, or some period of time thereafter, a company has to give us a letter saying they will be an applicant and enclose their check. So we defeat the purpose of, from the public sector side. The public sector side doesn't want to be working with a lot of companies that aren't really going to become applicants. And the longer we postpone the applicant phase of that, we leave them in that position. And from the standpoint of the developers want to get going. They don't want to have to be limited in talking to state agencies. So they want it, presumably, to come as quickly as possible, too, for the most part. But anyway, so that's where we were.
Suppose we had, that's where we've been, but suppose we had a situation in which you said that, taking into account the $400,000 fee is the sign of seriousness that unlocks the keys under the protocol that we've established to extended discussions with permit granting authorities. Suppose we had a situation in which we said you have to pay the $400,000 no later than the time you file the Phase 1 application. But at any time before that, you can pay, starting tomorrow, you could pay the $400,000 along with a certificate that said, I intend to file an application as soon as the applications are available to file. And I understand that this is my application fee, and I understand that it's not refundable. I intend to be an applicant. So you have an early thing and a late thing. So people who want to get their ducks in a row before they put it down could get their ducks in a row. People who had their ducks in a row, they thought, and they had to then take the risk that the regulations would be unhappy regulations by the time it came around. But that's a business risk. they could put down the money and sign the certificate and get going.
So it's really up to the developer as to
Yeah.
when they become an applicant or
Right,
not.
Right.
But they would be, if I understand you correctly, at all times, they would be deemed an applicant upon paying
The
the
400,000.
400,000.
That is,
Non-refundable.
that
The
continues,
non-refundable
that
portion.
continues to be the measure of
That's
becoming
the
an
measure.
applicant.
Being
But this
deemed an
puts, puts the control of that date you could do it the moment you get your RFA, right?
You can
Or
do it tomorrow, even before you get the RFP.
Oh, okay.
I mean, that's, I'm
Subject to
just
the
putting that out
receipt.
hypothetically.
I plan to find, kind of,
I plan to file, I know what's
RFA
coming
and
down.
half.
I'll take my risk, I'll take my.
With your
What's
choice.
typical in other jurisdictions? What have you seen?
You're an applicant, you're an applicant when you file the application. In most cases, there isn't this, bidding process type. In most cases, you just file, anybody who wants to file, they file, and they become an applicant once they filed the application, and they pay their fee at the time they filed the application. In Pennsylvania, for example, where there was a contest, there was a date certain when everything had to be filed, and it was at that point that you paid your money. And then you were an applicant. So this would be creative, nothing wrong with that. And
Gets the process started.
I'm trying to think through what the advantages and disadvantages are of being an applicant at an earlier date. I guess it gets you into being able to see other agencies more often. It also imposes certain restrictions on you under the act that only applicants have, that they wouldn't otherwise have. But that's their
Campaign,
choice.
Political things, and
Right.
other disqualifications, and
Right.
all the ethical things that kick in.
Right, that's their choice.
I think I mean, the basic idea of putting the trigger mechanism in the control of the developer, I think, is a great idea. Whether we are ready to get it, I mean, I think the October 15th, give or take, the issuance of the RFA 1 regs, of the RFA 1. Just because it's a date that's out there, we're not really ready yet to have there be applicants tomorrow, and we don't have a way, we're not have a way to bring in the money or what to do with the money, we're not really set up to. So
I hear that.
we haven't set up the ombudsman process, so, I mean, maybe we could do it by September 1st as opposed to October 15th, but it's kind of a clean date to use the issuance of the RFA 1 as the date at which any developer may pay their fee and become an applicant, and no later than the time they actually submit the completed RFA. I think it's a really good solution.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Great. There was one other, there is well, we need to talk to the state agencies about this because it affects them, but I don't think they'll have a problem with it, but there's. Did you mean to, this issue about the exhaustion of staff, was that one that we could talk about today?
I don't know if we were gonna talk about that or
We're
not.
getting some stuff.
Okay.
I had noted that I thought we were, but I'm not.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Okay.
That deals with the issue of at what point do applicants and licensees later have the opportunity to go to the commission to receive determinations on interpretations of the rules. In the phase 1 process, it won't be that prevalent. There will be some issues that are involved in the investigation that the deputy director of the IBE will be making, and so it bears consideration in that regard. But for the most part, it comes up in the course of operation of the casinos, where there'll be staff who will be receiving, in the first instance, requests from the casino for revisions of their internal controls. Per se, but a petitioning process that if the particular casino or the requester is not satisfied with the answer they get from the staff, they can request a hearing before you, not a formal hearing, but to be on an agenda and to present their question to you. That's the procedure. It's done differently in different places, and you have choice. There's some issues that you may want to really delegate to staff. And it's common that the commission will create a delegation of authority. We have area in the regulations here for delegation of authority to staff, so that fairly perfunctory, in fact, with withdrawal cases, in some instances, you may want to delegate to staff the authority to have the final determination. But in more serious instances, you may want to have ability on the part of the applicants and the licensees to come to you and petition. And we had drafted a formal procedure for that. All the declaratory ruling is not, we discussed with you and the judge earlier, it's not exactly a duplicate of the declaratory judgment procedures in court, but it's similar in the sense that it would be a request on the part of a party for determination by you as to what a particular rule means or whether a particular proposal on their part is viable.
There are two, now as I heard you say that, there are two pieces to that. One piece is a staff decision with which somebody disagrees, and they have an administrative review by the commission. The second is what does a rule mean? This is ambiguous, I don't understand it. I'm not gonna go to the staff and see what the staff says. I'm gonna come to you directly for a declaratory judgment, basically, as to what the meaning of the rule is. That poses two different considerations, at least for me. The first, it seems to me, we should have an opportunity by somebody who's denied something by the staff and who's dissatisfied with it to come to the commission to get a final ruling. In most circumstances, there may be someone who wouldn't want to do it. The second, a declaratory interpretation of a regulation before there's an actual controversy, or what is the policy of the commission on X hypothetical, it strikes me as more troublesome, frankly, because it could involve, situations in which we're going to be spending time deciding issues that in fact are never going to arise. But I welcome your further discussion on that second part of it.
Well, I think we contemplate a complete hypothetical situation that would be presented to the commission. It would be a case of controversy, to use legal terminology. There would be some situation in which a casino is confronted, and it would be asking for your determination as to whether a particular practice would be permissible, for example.
Changing technology.
Yeah, right.
Like you said, that your statute says something has to be submitted in writing on XYZ date.
Right.
But all of a sudden, they say, well, can we submit it electronically? But you don't have any provision that allows for electronic submission. Can they come to you and get a ruling that from this day forward, an electronic submission would be acceptable?
Why for that, couldn't they just go to the staff, get an answer, and then come to us if they didn't like the answer?
They could do that, but that was the same, that's just one extra step. I mean, it's the same process, though. Submitted to get a declaration from the commission that going forward, this is allowed.
But there would have to be a party, in action involved.
It couldn't be someone who just had an idea and wanted to do something, they were gonna come to the commission and get you to say, yes, it's okay to be done. It would have to be a party to a process then.
One declaratory ruling that we had was computer access, which we spoke about this morning. Under the original Casino Control Act, there was in New Jersey, there was a requirement that the agents and the state police had access to all information on the casino floor. And as technology changed, the state had the same access in a computerized format. So one of the casinos, on behalf of all the other casinos, filed a request for a declaratory ruling, and that resulted in certain briefs and litigation, and ultimately the commission made a decision which essentially preserved the Division of Gaming Enforcement's access to information So that's the type of an issue which may either be a casino-specific issue or an industry-wide issue that you wouldn't want staff opining on. That's a major policy call that would, at least in my opinion, justify a declaratory ruling before the commission.
That's interesting.
And it's probably not likely to be a weekly occurrence.
Right.
They're far more rare than that.
Right.
I think for the most part, this is stuff that's way down the road for us, right? So.
Yes.
you know, at the moment, I think, it seemed to me, saying that you can, but.
I'm not sure that it is way down the road. I mean, these questions could arise during the RFA one process. What does this mean? What does this reg, I'm about to file my application, what does this reg mean?
Or who has to file?
Yeah, a very likely scenario will come up immediately, which is, you know, a company saying, well, you know, who has to file in our company? And then there'll be some disagreement, I'm sure, in
Right.
some company as to how far, you know, the qualification will be extended.
Right.
And that would be something staff would make a decision on. If they don't like it, then it would be something that would be taken up. If there's a particular class of qualifiers, maybe, then that might be something that would be subject to a declaratory.
Right.
Right.
I would sort of echo back some of the discussions we were talking about, you know, the policy decisions happening at the commission level and having that flexibility, especially now that we're in startup mode. I would be in favor of that notion, that to have the flexibility of staff review this, but if there's something that the commission needs to rule on, if you will, to have that authority, that ability, rather.
We may be not explaining it as well as we could. I'm not sure that we're talking about, as the judge said, two distinct different processes. They may be distinct. There may be a situation, as Fred explained, one where the petition would be made directly to the commission without any going to staff in the first instance. But we're also talking about this procedure as the mechanism to take the staff decision to the commission.
No, I understand that one.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
so
that one makes, for me, that one makes good sense.
I agree.
And the other one may make good sense too. I mean, I hadn't thought about it before, the way you explained it. It seems to me worth writing out a regulation that would allow both, and let's take a look at what it looks like concretely, and then come back and discuss it further.
We can give you a draft and, you know, for further discussion.
Okay.
There is a draft
Yeah.
Yes.
declaratory language in there now.
Yeah.
We'll take a closer look.
Yeah.
at it.
Are there other things on your agenda?
But we just wanted to give you an update on the strategic plan. And
Good.
in a nutshell, you know, we've had meetings internally and with Kathy O'Toole, and we're proceeding. The important takeaway here is we are generally on schedule, and we'll be circulating the first drafts of that probably in early September. You've received and discussed previously a number of memos and things that are on that chart that will not be memos, will be in the strategic plan.
Right. Great. I had one thing I wanted to just get your views on while we have your expertise at the table. Last week, we had a little bit of a conversation about the issue of competition in Eastern Mass because of a Globe story that ran that we thought maybe gave an impression that was not in the public interest. But it is a puzzle to me, at least, and I don't know what the other commissioners think, that at this stage of the game, our smallest market, Western Mass, is our most competitive market. We have a number of major players that are expressing interest and have been for quite some time and doing a lot of spade work. In Eastern Mass, we have one and a maybe, which is our biggest market, and sort of presumptively, you would think that if you're in this business, that would be the place where you'd want to be. So it's, and it is not in the public interest, if it can be avoided, to have only one bidder for the reasons we talked about at our meeting last week. Because our job is to try to make sure that the Commonwealth, the taxpayers, get the maximum economic development, the maximum revenue, the maximum access to this entertainment and so forth. So I'm just wondering, from your knowledge of the industry and so forth, if you have an explanation, does it strike you as odd or not? What's your analysis for why this might be?
Yeah, and I think Guy's gonna wanna, comment as well.
Yeah.
There are a number of variables here, and I guess the most important is the internal assessments that potential companies are making of the market in terms of return on investment, in terms of the cost of construction, in terms of the competition, on the East Coast. And we certainly always favor more competition rather than a monopoly situation. But I think all of those factors, there's more competition on the East Coast, the Indian casinos in Connecticut, Rhode Island going with table games. I think there's assessments taking place on the part of the industry. And none of us speak for the industry.
Right.
This is just our own, personal opinions on these types of issues that are taking place right now, and those assessments are being made. Some of the larger companies, like Las Vegas Sands, are clearly moving toward the Asian market. As you know, or you will come to know, the center of the gaming universe is now in Asia. And Macau is projected to do $40 billion this year. Singapore will do in excess of $7 billion. So.
And Las Vegas is what?
Las Vegas Strip is about $5 billion. So that's all, the whole strip. So that just puts the perspective, in place, and companies are always assessing, where they can get the biggest bang for their buck, and the reality is, Japan's considering the legalization of casinos. There was a referendum on one of the islands in Taiwan that's close to China that passed this week. So you're not only competing on the highest end for that market, but you're competing with domestically and internationally.
But if anything, I would have thought that would have suggested that if you would play in Massachusetts, you'd want to play in the biggest market. You wouldn't want to play in the smallest or the medium. You'd want to play in the biggest.
Well, I think, like many industries, the casino industry of late has experienced a great deal of consolidation. So there are only so many players in the business. And they can only go to, as Freda's pointed out, they can only go to so many places. And they have to pick and choose among the places they go to, among that coterie small group of the major names that everybody would recognize. One possibility is that there may be non-traditional gaming companies, or non-traditional companies that are not involved in gaming per se, who haven't really taken a hard look at the possibility of coming to a jurisdiction and either beginning to look at the casino business as a viable business, or those who have recently entered the business and would look at Massachusetts instead of expecting only the name big players, that those non-traditional companies, even totally non-gaming companies, could contract with a manager and come into a new jurisdiction with maybe even better financial situation than would some of the traditional gaming companies. And whether or not that has occurred to anybody on the outside, I can't say. They're very astute people, but it's something that might be considered or pursued.
For example, in New Jersey, we've noticed in the racing industry, which has been suffering tremendously in the last few years, that there has now been essentially outside funding that has investments that have taken over the two New Jersey tracks that are owned by the state. And in both cases, extended leases were given on very favorable terms. But the particular parties that are involved in those projects right now are also very desirous, and they've said so publicly, of getting involved in alternative forms of gaming, not just horse racing, whether it's slots at the tracks or sports betting or whatever the law may allow as it develops. But Guy's point that these are companies that are not casino companies, okay, but they have they're quality companies with decent financial backing where they can attract financing and to get them into a market like this, they can hire a gaming professional to run their operations. The attractiveness of a particular jurisdiction is, there's so many factors that influence it, but, you know, some of the things we've talked about here, there is still, to a certain degree, some time left before the Indian gaming issue is going to be decided in the southeastern region. There is some uncertainty in the market as to what that would mean to a pure commercial operation coming in and competing. So that clarification hopefully will occur soon, as soon as those negotiations are completed, regardless of the outcome. And then in addition to that, just in terms of the industry as a whole, the presence you have in the western part, you know, there's different venues that have been mentioned. I know there's been some differentiation beyond the minimum capital investment that's involved, but you have some different players there. You have an Indian nation that's interested in protecting its flank, so to speak. You have outside, at least one company that has no prior gaming experience that's looking to be one of these new companies to enter into it, and that's healthy. And you may find that there's still plenty of time left for that to occur here in the southeast and in the Boston area in particular.
And in terms of the Boston area, to the question you asked about why the West, and I'm no economist, but I would assume that the cost in Boston is going to be much higher in terms of the barrier to entry here. The cost of building a first-class facility could be twice as much in the Boston area as it would be in another area of Massachusetts. And when you consider the other costs that are incumbent on an applicant here, they all look on the return on investment, and if the investment's higher, then that puts added pressure on the company.
And speaking to return on investment, what makes it a bit more difficult in a market like Boston, which has long survived with tourism and things like that, given what you already have, a gaming interest would then have to compete with that product. So the question is, how much do I have to build to make myself so desirable that people forego other things to do this? So that's all part of that cost, the cost of entry. What is the cost of entry to be the product that people want to come to, and how much is that in Boston, or a major metropolitan city that already has other competition for your leisure dollar, versus maybe further west where there's not so much competition for the leisure dollar?
Well, we're of course looking in all these markets for new dollars, not for shifting dollars. And so that's what, I mean, part of our licensing criteria is going to be looking at that, but I hear what you're saying.
You talk about the cases in New Jersey where you're seeing this new development model, and from what I've read, I think what happened in Cleveland and Cincinnati was also this new model of real estate property developer, and in comes the management piece of the casino. And certainly that seems to be the trend, at least here in America. It looks like in Asia, it's whoever the gaming interest is doing it all by themselves. How do the investment sources look at these type of opportunities? I mean, what are the folks on Wall Street saying about this type of model, and, you know, how are they looking at Massachusetts as a place to back somebody who might be interested in doing
Well, I
this
don't
kind of
know, I
partnership?
can't speak as to Massachusetts, specifically, but the investment community, the private equity, the institutional investors are always looking to maximize their return on investment. They are very coldly objective, and they are always looking for opportunities. In my recent trip, that I just got back from, we met with a lot of investment people in Hong Kong, and there is a tremendous thirst for making investment. There's a lot of money on the sidelines right now, both in gaming and in the entertainment and leisure industry, which is going to pick and choose their investments where they can get the most likely and largest return on that investment.
One example, in New Jersey recently, a real estate developer purchased resorts, the first casino, Resorts International, no real background in gaming, but hired a gaming manager. The attraction in that situation was that the price was just very reasonable.
Right.
Because of the condition of Atlantic City, prices have gone way down in terms of buying a casino. And so it was, his financing was based on the attractiveness of that investment attracted the financing.
I was thinking about it also in terms of Dodge auction. I was, a reverse auction for all the reasons that you're stating, barriers to entry, cost, but many of the requirements that have been set on the legislation, the bar is such that there's only a number of limited players, if you will,
Yes.
that really are either interested or able. And the other piece also is relative to the geographic conditions of Massachusetts, which are not necessarily the same in other jurisdictions. There's little land to build, especially in the eastern part, that's not contaminated or available, frankly. And those could also be factors playing themselves out.
Yes, and location, and I mean, when we did the recent Ohio project, as we did that, we learned that, Detroit's only 2 hours from Toledo, and when the Toledo casino opened, there was an expected negative impact on the 3 Detroit casinos. So the same thing is taking place here with companies who are considering the investment, the western part of the state. There's not nearly as much saturation as in the east coast.
In some of those investment houses that's been mentioned before that are on the sidelines right now, we certainly would encourage communication, with the commission at the appropriate time, just if nothing else, to introduce them to the product that you have here, that you are going to be investment friendly, that you're trying to set this up. They will listen to that. They'll send representatives, and we've been at many of those meetings where, they want to hear what is this environment going to be like, and hearing it directly from the commission in a non-applicant specific scenario, just in terms of the availability of funding, can be helpful in changing some attitudes that, in the long run, when the applicant, whether it's a new applicant, a new player, or a traditional player coming forward looking for financing, that door might be opened by just an assurance by you all as to the process.
So who were you talking about that we might talk to?
We could identify like investment houses.
Yeah, we don't want to say publicly.
Yeah.
but
Oh, okay.
There's also on Wall Street investment forums and gaming all the time, and we're not saying you go there to recruit applicants. I don't
Right.
think that's appropriate, but I think it
Right.
does help to explain to Wall Street what the opportunity is here, and to show that it's going to be investor friendly as possible, and what that opportunity is. And I think that's something that should be encouraged.
Well, that's a really helpful thought, and that would be something that would go to helping people who are already identified as potential applicants get their funding, as well as maybe encourage others. So
Right, exactly.
it would have an even-handed
Correct.
effect. That's a really interesting idea. I'm glad we talked about that, yeah.
And we can follow up now.
Yeah, please. Well, I hope you will, because, I think we'd like very much to consider that.
Absolutely.
Great.
Okay.
Anything else?
Okay, thank you very
All
much.
right.
So Commissioners, all set. Thank you very
Congratulations.
much. Well timed, yeah, right.
Thank
So
you.
do we have to come back again, or was this the time that we?
No, this is the last one, yeah. I was just testing you.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I may now need a quick break.
Okay, good. We'll have one more temporary break. Commissioner Zuniga and I were discussing this idea that the consultants had come up with about the idea of talking with the investment community about, about the environment here and about what we want to accomplish. And reminded me of, what A&F secretaries and the treasurer or the treasurer's people do to go to Wall Street to talk to rating agencies, to talk to the investors about Massachusetts. And I think that's a really interesting idea, particularly given what you've identified as this emerging model, where it isn't bankrolled purely by the casino developers for the casino, but other developments, use casinos as anchors, kind of, to encourage other development, which is exactly what we're trying to do, is maximize the economic development. So I think it's worth thinking about that a little bit, and certainly talking with these folks and getting more ideas. But I think that idea, maybe even sort of, they're one of our many constituencies, have an introductory meeting, get to know people a little bit, make a preliminary meeting, and then go back every 6 months or whatever and give them an update. I think that's a really, really good idea. Okay, where were we? Item 5C, technical and other assistance to communities. Excuse me. The ombudsman job description, this we talked about last time. We had a job description. At the end of our meeting, we agreed, at the end of our conversation last week, we agreed that I would get comments from Commissioner Stebbins and review/incorporate them, and then we would use that job description. I have taken his comments, bought them all, and we'll circulate that in final form, then we'll post that. But we are in the process. We do have a couple of candidates coming in now this week for the ombudsman position. There was, no, okay. Anything else on the ombudsman? The protocol for interactions with state agencies, that is still being considered, I think.
Well, there's just a couple, that's in my court, Mr. Chairman, as is the next one, and there's just a couple of minor tweaks that we talked about last week to complete that. I didn't get those done. They'll be done for next week. And the community advisory was to have a flow chart with it. I expect to have that by next week as well.
Okay.
So that's in progress.
That's
have
great.
that for the consideration.
Right. Same thing I said before, you've got a lot on your plate.
Well, I
If
may
others-
ask for some help on the second one.
Yeah, okay. But also, I think, we could get the existing piece out and follow it up with the other if we needed to.
Yeah,
but-
that's a possibility too.
Okay. Okay, anything else on item C? Charitable gaming, Commissioner?
Let me just explain where I am and where I think we will go. I've talked with Commissioner Zuniga, with the lottery folks. I've been back to talk to the lottery folks again to get them to answer some additional questions. I've talked with the representatives of the Attorney General's office. I've talked with the representatives of the Treasurer's office now as a result of those discussions. The basic structure of the situation, in a very brief nutshell, is this. There are 4 components to charitable gaming in Massachusetts. There are Beano games, bingo, elsewhere they're called Beano here.
There are Beano games?
Beano games, yeah. That's because they're played with a bean instead of a chip. There are sold at those Beano games something called pull tabs, which is a special kind of scratch-like ticket that's only sold at Beano games. There are lotteries and there are bazaars. Bazaars are basically the casino nights that charities run. The total gross gambled in all those areas is $75 million, of which $18 million winds up in the hands of the charities. The rest is prize money and expense money and taxes. All of that is taxed. There are 2 regulators now. The lottery regulates Beano and pull tabs. The Attorney General regulates bazaars and lotteries, with the assistance of the city and town clerks, and to a lesser extent, the Executive Office of Public Safety. As of July 31st, the statute provides that we will regulate bazaars that are not regulated by the lottery. So as of July 31st, there will be 3 regulators for the same set of considerations and our same set of games. And our regulation of the bazaars not regulated by the lottery is underneath the overarching regulation by the Attorney General of those same bazaars. So the regulations that are in place are the Attorney General's regulations, and to the extent there are any regulations. This whole system doesn't need another regulator, I would submit. And so I have been talking tentatively with the Attorney General and with the Treasurer about how to consolidate regulation. And those discussions are ongoing and are not yet at fruition. What I would plan to do, for a variety of reasons and subject to the Commission's approval, is this. Next week, we've committed to make a report to the legislature by July 31st. I would propose by next week to have a little outline of a draft report that was general and necessarily left some blanks in it as to how the consolidation of regulatory authority ultimately would turn out. The following week, if that were acceptable to the Commission, if that general outline were acceptable, the following week I would have a draft report to the legislature ready for the Commission that would talk about where the consolidated regulatory authority would lie. And that would be for discussion by the Commission. If the Commission was prepared to approve it then, that would be fine. If not, we would have a week more to think about it, approve it with modifications that came out of the discussions on the 31st and send it off to the legislature that day. So that's what I would propose to do. This sounds a little looser than I think it is, but I think that in terms of the location of the regulatory authority, I think, as I say, there are discussions going on now. They're informal, they haven't been approved, we can't approve them. But I think we'll have something in place that will make sense by that time.
Sounds reasonable.
The only thing is, and this, now the third time I've said this, is you've got a lot on your plate, and, it's a lot of drafting of different things, and again,
Yeah, but that fosters succinctness.
all right, good.
Well said.
I would agree.
Yeah. Hate succinctness.
You hate succinctness.
Succinctly said.
Okay, great, thank you. Item 7, Budget and Finance, Commissioner Zuniga.
Yes, thank you. I submitted as part of the packet a report from the MARS system on accounts paid on the fiscal year of 2012. These are all closing that partial fiscal year that we've had since inception. And I would submit that there are certain costs because of timing not being, that were incurred in fiscal year 12, not reflected in this report because they are, they take time to process. Notably, for example, the fringe is only a partial of the payroll figure that you see above because fringe comes back and gets assessed slightly later. But that's normal, or rather that's par for the course. I would also say that many of these expenses, as you will see next week, with a draft of a budget that I'm preparing, will grow in relation to others because this is representative of a very startup couple of months, April and May, and most of June, that were part of this initial period. I can take any questions or as to what.
So none, the consultants services consultants, I guess
Yes.
that's me, that's Michael and Carol?
That is, yes,
Yeah, okay.
and that reflects, that does not reflect an invoice from Spectrum yet.
Which
It
came in,
reflects-
came in.
Came in since the close of this.
Okay.
Of this period.
Okay,
Legal represents only what was paid and processed in the
Right.
prior fiscal year for Anderson and Krieger.
right.
And I have the detail of by vendor, we can produce these by, by any number of
Yeah.
iterations.
No, it's great. I mean, this is probably the fastest year-end report any state agency's ever done.
Yeah, it's great.
Only because there's a partial
Yeah, right.
partial year.
Are there any overlap costs between educational forums, meeting expenses, and then conference and meetings?
Slightly, yeah, and what I tried to do with this was to apportion most of what I could to the educational forums as a line item. But there are, you might see here, for example.
It's not a big amount of money, I understand.
Space rental, by the way, conference and meetings. Some of that refers to the convention center where we held a couple of our meetings, but we also held a couple of our, the one educational forum. So I didn't necessarily call those out. If we wanted specific object codes, that's something that we should start thinking about as to how we want these being reported or aggregated.
Great. Any other comments, questions?
Very well done.
That's great.
Thank
Yep,
you.
Thank you.
Great.
Public education, community outreach, responses to requests for information. Do we have anything that we need to talk about, Commissioner McHugh?
None.
Okay. Report from the Director of Communications and Outreach.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
I'll actually be really quick today, because I know that you've all been filled in on this process of branding and website creation and things like that. So the good news is that I've already met with a couple of firms. I have a few more meetings this week. By beginning of next week, we'll hopefully have some proposals to review about what that process will look like and what each company's suggestion is in terms of how to go about it. The good news is that met with a lot of talented people that have some great ideas. So I think ultimately it'll end up being a very difficult decision for us, but everybody so far has been confident that they can do it in phases, in relatively short order, have interesting philosophies on how to go about logo creation and building a brand, which I think will be a great process for the commission to go through, actually. And so the meetings have all gone very well, and I hope to have those proposals soon.
Have you talked with Commissioner Zuniga about a budget plug for this?
We
category?
have,
Okay.
yeah, we discussed that last week.
Okay.
And I'll have more of an idea, too,
Yeah.
once I get the proposals back, exactly what that's going to look like. I've asked them to sort of give it to me in almost menu style, so that we can prioritize and decide what immediate next steps are. But like I said, all of those things, I think, will all sort of feed into the establishment of the Speakers Bureau and things like that, which is well underway, but I'm hoping to coincide the two, because I think that they are hand in hand.
But the logo branding, especially a website, will take a lot longer than to set up the